On Thursday, Bob settled at the table, eyeing his Miller Lite bottle. He opted for just a six-pack, wary of getting drunk if things went awry soon. When the upstairs music ceased, he grasped that his wife neared completion of her preparations. Typically, Bob worked late on Thursdays due to his wife's bachelorette parties with friends. His parents took their daughter, Casey, and his wife enjoyed drinks with coworkers. He lingered, tackling paperwork to ensure an early Friday departure for family time. It all seemed meticulously planned. He carved out time in his busy schedule, his parents lavished attention on their granddaughter, and his wife relished personal time with friends. At least, that's what he believed. He was reminded of last Tuesday's lunch with Vicky by the sound of his wife ascending to the bathroom. He thought about the need to frequent the store more or inquire about delivery for those amazing sandwiches. Seating himself to monitor the door, he soon spotted a familiar figure entering the restaurant. Observing her scanning the room, Bob rose and waved. She caught sight of him and headed his way. At 31, Vicky was the eldest of his wife's former flames. Bob held a fondness for her and noted she was the only married one among them. She possessed a knack for soothing tensions without being a doormat. He had to concede, with her dark, wavy hair and fair complexion, Vicky looked quite appealing. While lacking in the chest department, she boasted a stunning face and legs for days. Her husband, Ron, regarded her as a heaven-sent gift, a sentiment reciprocated. As she settled across from him, she thanked Bob for meeting. "I understand how busy you are, Bob. I appreciate your time," she said, fixing him with an intense gaze. "No problem, Vicky," Bob replied. "Though I must confess, meeting you here without Sharon feels a tad uncomfortable. I prefer dining with my spouse, but since it concerns Sharon, I'm all ears. I presume you're planning a surprise for her birthday next month." Bob didn't anticipate the sadness in Vicky's eyes at the mention of their lunch or Sharon's birthday. "What's wrong, Bob? I know you and Sharon deeply love each other. I've witnessed enough to recognize your bond. That's why I'm here. It might strain our friendship, but if it helps salvage your marriage, I'm committed." "There's no easy way to put this, but Sharon has been seeing someone for 2 months now," Vicky revealed. Bob was stunned. "This has to be a joke. A really bad one," he expressed to Vicky. "I'm very sorry, Bob, but it's not a joke. About 3 months ago, after you took on this project you're working on, Sharon became depressed. She's been irritable at work, and when we go out, she seems even more bored than usual. After a few martinis, we managed to get her to open up about missing you and feeling abandoned. She also mentioned feeling like you two were just a middle-aged married couple, letting life pass you by." Just then, the waiter came to take Vicky's order. She opted for a Cobb salad and lemon iced tea. Bob's mind was still racing with thoughts of his wife being secretive. In their 8 years together, Bob was confident his wife would confide in him if she felt unhappy. He believed they were always honest about their feelings, even when they disagreed. He turned to Vicky and urgently whispered, "Did she sleep with him?" "No, at least not as far as I know. And based on what I know of her, your wife is usually pretty open. That's why I'm surprised by her behavior," Vicky responded. "Bob, you should know something. Every woman I've talked to says the same thing. I imagine you both often complain about being overwhelmed by everyday life, or something along those lines," Vicky continued. "When Sharon brought it up, we all sympathized with her and told her the same thing, that she's a handsome woman and you should pay more attention to her. Unfortunately, my sister was there that night." "What does your sister have to do with this?" Bob asked, managing to suppress some anger. "Honestly, my sister is promiscuous," Vicky replied. The waiter who brought her tea raised an eyebrow at her comment. Vicky took a sip and went on. "My parents were both cheaters. I don't know who cheated first, but they always wanted revenge on each other. When I was 17, I asked them why they were still together, and they acted like I was from another planet. They said they loved each other, and that's all that mattered. This affected my sister and me differently. I realized cheating ruins relationships. But my sister thought it was okay as long as you love each other. I love her, but she's misguided. Anyway, back to the point. My sister Gary suggested that if she doesn't find romance at home, she should seek it elsewhere. I told her she was wrong, but then Hannah and Gail started discussing finding better partners and keeping things secret. I think for them it was purely academic, especially since they're not married. Sharon said she'd never cheat on you, but I think my sister's words planted doubts in her mind." "Why do you think that?" asked Bob. Now uncertain about Sharon's fidelity, he began to process more information. None of this was easy to hear, but Bob always believed that knowledge was power. The following week, Luke Jonas and his team joined them at the Red Horse Bar. Sharon claims she didn't invite him, but she mentioned our group dance plans to him. It's usually fun when more people try something new, but not with Luke around. Now armed with a name, Bob acknowledged, "Knowledge is power." "Tell me about that guy, Luke," Bob demanded. Vicky noted Bob's assertive tone with a slight smile and proceeded, "Luke Jonas is notorious for chasing women. He pursues every woman, showing interest in anyone who falls sufferer to his charm. He doesn't mind if she's married or not, or particularly attractive. He simply enjoys the chase. Your wife caught his eye from the start, but until that night, he hadn't pursued her. Now he's after her, and instead of standing up to him, she's avoiding him. It's common knowledge that if Luke faces another lovemaking molestation charge, he's fired. She could halt his advances, but she doesn't. They've been frequently seen chatting in the cafeteria for the past few months. I attempted to discuss it with her, but she became defensive, insisting they're only friends and that Luke listens to her and understands her problems. I questioned her if she'd act the same way if you were present, and she blushed, admitting she wouldn't. Then she became upset, mentioning something about you not noticing her. After that, I backed off and kept an eye on her. They appeared to settle down at work, and I thought everything was back to normal until that incident 3 weeks ago. As Vicky's order arrived, she began to eat. Bob, observing his reaction, sipped his lemonade, his mind elsewhere. He wondered how she could think he'd be upset about her flirting with another man. He knew he wasn't overly jealous simply because he loved and trusted his wife. As for not noticing her, he pondered if he had become too absorbed in his work project. There's a significant reward waiting for him in the end, but perhaps he's pushed too hard. Curiosity about the incident 3 weeks ago nagged at him. Did he really want to know? For the next 5 minutes, they ate in silence as Bob processed Vicky's revelations. Undoubtedly, he was angry. She had no justification for being so close with another man, yet he could almost understand her logic. If he had been more attentive, perhaps none of this would have happened, and by not informing him of her flirtatious behavior, she was essentially lying to him. Of course, it was a lie of omission, but for now, he could overlook her actions and focus on fixing the situation. He would speak to her and share his concerns. If she's honest and agrees to distance herself from Luke, they can move forward. So far, he hadn't seen any lasting damage, unless, of course, something significant occurred within the last 3 weeks. "Tell me what happened 3 weeks ago. How bad was it?" he asked. With this inquiry, he found some solid mental ground beneath him. He felt he could handle it. Vicky looked at him sympathetically. "This is where it gets ugly, Bob. 3 weeks ago, we found ourselves back at the Red Horse Bar to dance. Luke and his friends arrived, and we all danced together, having a good time. Sharon had been drinking more than usual, with Luke purchasing drinks for her all evening, causing her to become quite intoxicated. I accompanied her to the restroom and realized she was even more inebriated than I had initially thought. Upon exiting, she held underwear in her hand, explaining that she wanted to feel liberated. Well, she was nearly drunk. I attributed her behavior to the drink and assisted her back to our table. I began attempting to persuade Hannah and Gail to help me take Sharon to my house so she wouldn't return home overly intoxicated. However, I noticed Sharon and Luke getting too close, bumping into each other and simulating lovemaking acts on the dance floor. After the group dancing ended, the rest of the evening felt like background noise. I witnessed Sharon placing the underwear in Luke's pocket at the end of a song, unfortunately witnessed by everyone else in the bar. Whistles echoed throughout the bar as Luke grinned widely and proceeded to give her a deep kiss. One of his friends recorded the scene on a mobile phone. I had hoped Sharon would resist, but she went along with it. When she noticed Bob's reaction, she apologized, saying she was sorry. His jaw literally dropped open, and he had to leave. He stuttered as he stood up and walked away, locking himself inside the bathroom, excusing himself for just a second. As he splashed water on his face and gripped the sink tightly, he recalled the night Sharon arrived home late, around 2:30 a.m., after Vicky called to say she'd be staying with her due to excessive drinking. This had happened several times before, and Bob was always grateful that Vicky and the girls ensured Sharon didn't receive a DUI citation. He remembered the passionate lovemaking they shared that night, sensing something different in her behavior. Returning to the present, he was overcome with rage, feeling betrayed by her arousal for another man and seemingly prepared for a confrontation upon returning home. "Damn," he thought. "What if she was thinking about him while we were together?" After composing himself, he returned to the table, noticing the sympathy on Vicky's face, but unsure how to respond. His sandwich remained untouched as he asked Vicky for more information. "Honestly, Bob, that's about it," she replied. The recent bachelorette parties were held at Hannah's house with wine and a lingerie show at work. Sharon seems distant with Luke, although he continues to pursue her. I thought it was over, but just yesterday I saw them talking. They stopped when I approached, so I'm not sure what's going on. I felt you needed to know, as she no longer listens to her friends, Vicky explained. As the waiter brought the bill, Bob quickly grabbed it and searched for his credit card. I'd like to observe their interaction and perhaps intimidate them right off the bat, he suggested. Sharon proposed, You ladies are going to the Red Horse Bar this week, so this Thursday when you go there, I'll show up and monitor them from the sidelines. He abruptly paused, noticing the apprehensive expression on Vicky's face. What did I say wrong? He inquired of Bob. Hannah has a doctor's appointment early Friday morning, and Gail is visiting her brother in Florida. If Sharon goes out on Thursday, it won't be with us, Vicky explained, reaching across the table to grasp my hand. I'm so sorry, darling, she expressed sorrowfully. I know it's better not to ask if you're okay. But here's my home phone number. Call any time to talk to Ron or me. Her husband was a marriage counselor, so conversing with him might prove beneficial. Thank you for informing me, Vicky. I understand this must be challenging for you, but I genuinely believe you're a good person and a good friend. I'm uncertain of what lies ahead, but I'm aware of the present circumstances, and I can take some measures. Thanks again. Bob expressed his gratitude, rose from the table, settled the credit card bill, and departed on Wednesday. Today marked a breakthrough in the project Bob was engaged in. They managed to secure a supply of finished parts from a startup company in Harrisburg, reducing setup time by 2 months, ensuring at least a week's supply despite unstable transport logistics. With 2 more phone calls, this plan would be completed 2 months ahead of schedule, saving millions for the military. The cash bonus would also be substantial, as Bob anticipated, and the project's recognition would significantly elevate his reputation. He should have been as content as a cat with a belly full of sour cream. Instead, he pondered how much he dreaded returning home and facing what he felt he should address. He resolved to investigate the matter himself. While he lacked access to her work email, he doubted they communicated through it, given HR's control. He logged into her Yahoo email account but found nothing incriminating. However, she could have a separate account, which he wouldn't know until accessing their home computer. Bob acknowledged his lack of tech savvy, realizing that buying security cameras or installing voice-activated microphones sounded appealing in theory, but he already had a counterplan in mind. He simply aimed to gather as much information as possible to gauge the extent of effort required to salvage or terminate his marriage. Sharon had already taken their daughter Casey away from his parents and manipulated him into delivering Chinese food. When he asked what she wanted, she responded by saying that, after 10 years together and 8 of them married, he should know by now that she loves him. He couldn't resist being sarcastic in his response, mentioning that he just wanted to ensure she's still content with the arrangement. His phone rang immediately after. She then requested an extra roll, mentioning Shakto. Had it not been for yesterday's bombshell, he would have been elated to arrive home an hour earlier and spend time with his wife and child. However, glancing at the clock, he realized that before the project began, this hour would have been 2 hours later. He also recognized that he hadn't been home with his family this early on a Friday since the project started. Coupled with fatigue and stress, it was evident how Sharon might feel neglected, yet that didn't justify her actions. As he entered through the front door, he caught sight of his wife reaching for a bottle of wine. He paused, simply admiring her figure. At 31, she epitomized the prime of womanhood. Standing at 5 feet tall, she boasted curves that were undeniably enticing. Even in loose sweatpants, her shapely rear was evident. With her hair tied back in a ponytail, she turned around, flashing him a radiant smile, prompting him to reflect on how incredibly fortunate he was to have her. Then, reality hit him. I'm so happy you're home, honey. How was work? She approached him, planting a kiss on his lips. Pretty good. We've made a major breakthrough on some supplies, so we might finish the project at least a month ahead of schedule. Sweetheart, I know I've been away from home a lot due to this project. It sucks that I can't share the details because it's classified. But I want you to know that you and Casey are my top priority, and I'll do everything to keep us safe, he assured her, gazing into her eyes. Did he detect a hint of remorse or guilt? Or was he just imagining things? It was one of those moments when he cursed his inability to read people. Often labeled as straightforward, he preferred direct communication and expected the same from others. While he knew his approach might initially seem blunt, people appreciated his honesty and no-nonsense attitude. This method had served him well for 34 years, and he saw little reason to change it until now. "Ah, darling," she responded. "We both adore you and understand. I do wish there were more of you around, but I know this is temporary. Still, I'm glad you acknowledge it." She seemed on the verge of tears. Was she genuinely emotional or just a skilled actress? "So, what does the project's early completion mean for you?" she inquired, unpacking food containers from her bag. "Well, firstly, it means a substantial bonus to my salary. The exact amount remains unknown until the project is approved, but it's not insignificant. Moreover, successfully completing our first government project should attract more work to the company. As the project leader, there may be lucrative opportunities with government contractors seeking my expertise. The higher-ups are aware of this, so I might negotiate some additional perks. If all goes smoothly, it should be quite rewarding," he explained, attempting to eat his sweet and sour pork with chopsticks before opting for a fork. "Didn't I mention this before?" he queried between bites. "Not that I recall, darling," she replied. "All I remember is you mentioning a significant contract you couldn't discuss, but it sounded promising." "And since then, it seems like we haven't had much conversation," she remarked, appearing a bit downcast before perking up. "But it looks like my husband will be back soon," she added with a brighter tone. He glanced at her. "Time to go fishing. So, what bar are you ladies heading to tomorrow night? Should I swing by after work to ensure you're all okay to drive home?" he asked, aiming for a casual tone. "Oh, actually, we decided to go to the Red Horse Bar for some group dancing, but I think we'll be done before you finish work," she replied, her gaze shifting to her orange chicken. His heart sank. At that moment, Casey finished her egg roll and requested bedtime stories. He cleared his plate and rinsed it in the sink before lifting his daughter and carrying her into the living room. For the next hour, he indulged his child by reading story after story until she drifted off to sleep. A soft snore emanated from the sofa where he spotted his wife curled up with her book abandoned in her lap. Picking up his daughter, he ascended the stairs to her bedroom, laying her gently in bed and tucking her in snugly beneath the covers. As he contemplated the forthcoming day, tears welled in his eyes. He longed for his daughter to remember these pleasant evenings with her parents, rather than the looming hardships ahead. Wiping away his tears, he descended the stairs to where his wife slept on the sofa. He pressed a tender kiss to her lips and pulled the blanket over her to shield her from the chill. Then he set out to find her phone, discovering it plugged into a wall socket on the nightstand in their bedroom. Unlocking it with a swipe, he began scrolling through her text messages. It didn't take long to find what he was seeking. Scrolling back, he traced their exchanges over the past 3 months. Him. "Hey, beautiful. It was fun watching you and the girls dance last night." Her. "Likewise. Bob works late on Thursdays and the in-laws watch Casey, so we had a girls' night." Him. "Your husband seems like a good guy, letting you have some fun." Her. "Yes, he's amazing." The messages remained benign for the next few weeks until this particular exchange. Her. "Vicky gave me a talking to today about our lunch breaks. I was annoyed, but she picked up on everything." Him. "Exactly. I don't want any misunderstandings." Her. "She asked if Bob would approve of how we've been acting, which got me thinking we might be giving off the wrong signals. Plus, I shouldn't be confiding all my issues to another guy. I'll try talking to Bob." Him. "I understand, but if you can't get his attention, you know where to find me. I'll even treat you to dinner if need be. Just as friends." Bob couldn't recall her attempting to discuss anything with him, but it might have been when he discovered the necessity for food-grade stainless steel for the project. He dedicated several days to sourcing a supplier capable of meeting the required quantity. Throughout this period, he could have been oblivious even if a bomb had been dropped on him. Until now. Reviewing her messages, all seemed innocuous. He felt it glaringly obvious that the idiot was making advances toward her. How could she not see it? Scrolling down, he encountered the next batch of messages. Her. "You have to return them today." Him. "What are you referring to?" Her. "You know very well my friends are furious with me right now, and I don't blame them. If Bob finds out I behaved like some sort of fancy woman, he might leave me." Him. "So you don't want me to show him the video?" Her. "What video? No one at work can see this." Him. "Sam was there, and he captured a video on his phone. I'll ensure he deletes it, but you owe me." Her. "Okay, I can't lose Bob. Not after last night." Him. "What happened last night?" Her. "It's really none of your business." Him. "Was he upset that you came home late and intoxicated?" Her. "Very funny." Hell, no. Let's just say something happened that turned everything upside down and leave it at that. Him. "So, Some dirty dancing with me made you toil for your husband's forgiveness? He should be thankful to me. Her. You're despicable. Last night was unforgettable, and it was because Bob and I love each other. Now give me back my underwear and ensure that damn video is erased. Her. Damn. It sounded like I was some sort of fancy woman. Bob deserves better than me. Him. No, he's fortunate to have you. He was keeping an eye on you, wasn't he? I'm sure he's a great guy, but you often go out alone. Her. I don't need anyone to watch over me. Just be the friend you claim to be and handle what I've asked. Please. Him. Sorry. Of course, I'll assist you, and afterward, I'll let you treat me to dinner. Her. Just ensure no one sees this video, and I'll do whatever you want. Nothing further until last Monday. Him. I heard the bachelorette party is canceled. How about dinner with me? Her. Not a good idea. Sorry. Him. Come on. Your husband will be at work, and the girls left you alone one evening with a friend, and we can chat like we used to in the cafeteria. Besides, you owe me. Her. Okay, I'll meet you at the Red Horse at 8. Him. No, meet me at TGIF located at the Sheraton Hotel. They have great drinks, and I don't want to be bothered by drunk idiots. If we drink too much, I'll get a room. Her. Okay, but it's just dinner with a couple of friends, and I'm grateful to you for ensuring the video never surfaced. It's bad enough that people at work have heard about this. Him. Don't worry about it. I saw Sam delete the video, and soon someone else will do something scandalous, and you'll be fine. See you at 8. That's when it hit him. This was likely the end of his marriage. How often had he witnessed his wife going out for a date with another man at a hotel restaurant bar? How could this end well? How could she not think closeness was involved? Closing the messages, he reconnected his phone to the charger, undressed, and slipped into bed alone. Sleep eluded him for a long while. On Thursday, she descended the stairs wearing her little black dress, the one she always donned when they went out together. She looked stunning. Pausing at the bottom of the stairs, she spotted him seated at the table. I didn't expect you to come home so early today, baby, she said, her tone faltering slightly. We need to talk, Sharon, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. This is perhaps the most crucial conversation we'll ever have. Please, take a seat. She sat down, looking apprehensive, and reached out for his hand as usual, but he withdrew it. I know there won't be a bachelorette party today. I know you're seeing Luke Jonas. Behind my back, he began. Bob, please let me explain. But he abruptly interrupted, slamming his fist on the table. Damn it, Sharon! Listen to me! He shouted. You can't speak until I've said my piece! She recoiled, tears welling in her eyes. He regarded her impassively and continued. As I said, I know you kissed that idiot at lunch. I know you danced with him at the Red Horse bar. I know you took off your underwear and gave them to him after some provocative moves on the dance floor. I know the only reason you were all over me 3 weeks ago was because you were excited about him. I also know that tonight you're going on a date with him to a restaurant in the hotel where your boyfriend has already made a reservation. I just don't know if you've already slept with him, and I don't know what could stop you if you haven't. He paused, trying to rein in his anger. Sharon, you lied to me by omission about Luke. You lied to me about your risque dance. And you lied to me about going out with the girls. Frankly, I'm exhausted, and my trust in you is shattered. I'm not even sure if I want to salvage this marriage, yet your actions suggest that you're no longer invested in it. Therefore, I present you with 3 options. He raised a finger. Option 1, you walk out that door and go to your idiot of a boyfriend. Even if you don't sleep together tonight, this choice will end our marriage. There's no chance I'll want to salvage it. He raised a second finger. Option 2, we sit here all night and you try to persuade me to work on saving our marriage. It'll be incredibly challenging for you to convince me, as I'm not inclined to believe a single word from your mouth. However, maybe you'll succeed because I truly love you, and we have a child to consider. I can tell you there's a 50% chance I'll be willing to try. He raised a third finger. Option 3, you take me with you tonight to confront your lover in front of me. You demand that he never speaks to or contacts you again. Then you allow us to speak to him privately for at least 15 minutes, out of earshot. This option will earn you the most respect and will maximize my willingness to work with you. If you didn't sleep with him or engage in any lovemaking activity, I promise I'll be 100% committed to making this relationship work. However, if you did, this is the only option that could potentially salvage our marriage. She appeared on the verge of vomiting, gazing at him with what could only be described as horror. Option 1, 2, or 3, Sharon. Which will you choose? The question lingered in the air for nearly a minute. She seemed to be restraining herself from being sick as she looked at me. Bob, I'm so sorry about everything, and I desperately need to talk to you. In response to your question, who will lead, you or me? Well, that was unexpected. I really didn't anticipate her opting for our meeting with her lover. I had thought it was almost certain she would sit here all night attempting to justify her behavior. Agreeing to arrange the meeting with her idiot actually earned her some points, but she was still deep in the red. I took the keys and followed her to the car. Out of habit, I opened the door for her, and she nearly broke down in tears as I pulled out onto the road. She glanced at me. I really ruined everything for us, didn't I? She asked quietly. Yes, Sharon, you really did, I replied, keeping my eyes on the road. What can I do to fix this? She asked. I pondered for a moment. I had a couple of scenarios in mind. Well, first and foremost, complete honesty from now on. I shouldn't even have to say this, but evidently you think it's acceptable to omit things I should know or to lie to me repeatedly. Along with this, you need to find a way to make me believe what you say. I'm not sure how you plan to do this, but frankly, I wasn't the one who broke our trust. Another thing I didn't think needed to be mentioned, but I'll say it anyway. He's dead to you. If we stay together, you won't talk to him at work. You won't inquire about his day. If he shows up at the bar you're at, you leave. If you can't leave, call me immediately. You don't accept drinks or gifts from him. Regardless of what he says, you cut off all communication with him. Next, when we return tonight, you'll tell me everything. I don't want to hear your thoughts. I understand I was consumed by this project, so I'll take some responsibility. If you harbor any resentment toward me, let me know. And lastly, for now, schedule marriage counseling. If you prefer to choose a counselor yourself, feel free to do so. Maybe Ron can recommend someone. When I finished speaking, her phone chimed with a message. She glanced down and paled even further. It's him wondering where I am, she murmured quietly. I reached out and she handed me the phone. Without a word, I scrolled through her text messages. There were a couple from earlier today. Him. Hey, I booked a room with a jacuzzi. Maybe we can relax after lunch. Bring your bikini. Her. You can't get me drunk enough to take a hot bath with you. I won't bring the bikini. Him. We'll see. You know what happens when you drink. Maybe you won't need a bikini. And then just now, him. Where are you? While waiting for you, I had a glass of wine. I replied, I'm running a little late. I have a surprise for you. Him. Oh, you brought your bikini. Perfect. I returned the phone to my wife. She read the messages and simply hung her head. You know these messages don't help your case, right? Just the ones from today make it seem like you're planning to hook up with him tonight. How much worse will it look if I scroll further? I asked, knowing full well how damning it would appear. I suppose I should ask, I began. Do you consider your text messages today as inappropriate flirting? Can you grasp how these exchanges have shattered all my trust in you? I heard her sobbing. Bob, I swear, I only intended to have dinner tonight. I never planned to sleep with him. I couldn't help but regard her as if she were foolish. Were you intending to give him your underwear after taking them off, like you did a few weeks ago? I didn't think she could grow any paler, but I was proven wrong. Sharon, we're almost there. You might want to fix your makeup and think about what you're going to say to Luke. Oh, and avoid drinking wine. She pulled down the visor and retrieved a napkin from the glove compartment. As she began to compose herself and stop crying, she started applying mascara. In a more composed tone, she asked, Bob, I understand why you think Luke was toying with me. Listening to you talk about it, I think it's true. But Bob, how could I have not seen this? I know my recent decisions don't reflect it, but I'm not a naive little girl. I've fended off more attractive and sophisticated men than Luke. So why did he target me? This is one of the reasons why I find it hard to believe what you say now. Sharon, you're a beautiful, intelligent woman who should see through this nonsense. That's why I have to wonder. Did you go along with it willingly? I responded. Imagine if I picked up some woman at a bar with this guy and lied to you that I was going to dinner with her tonight. No wonder you're so angry and hurt. Her color seemed to be returning, and her voice grew slightly firmer. Okay, I messed up and now I have to find a way to fix it. Thank you for giving me a chance. She leaned in to kiss me, but at the last moment I turned my head, allowing her to peck me on the cheek. I'm not over this. Not in the long run, I said. She looked at me, almost shocked. We usually show a lot of affection. Hopefully we can get back to that. What should I tell him? She asked as we pulled into the restaurant parking lot. Finding a spot, I turned off the engine and let my anger simmer. What do I want you to tell him, Sharon? Our relationship is barely hanging on because of your actions with that idiot. You two have shattered the core of our marriage. Our daughter could spend Thanksgiving with you and Christmas with me. I want to make this clear, so tell him whatever you want." She sat quietly for a moment, then sighed and opened the car door. As we approached the restaurant in the hotel, she took a step as if reaching for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't welcome her touch either. We entered, and a pretty red-haired girl stood behind the small kiosk, asking if we were a party of two. Before I could respond, my wife interjected, stating that we were meeting someone there who was already present. The head waitress acknowledged her statement and suggested we take a look around. Not knowing what the person looked like, I relied on my wife to guide us. She lightly nudged me with her elbow and gestured towards the back of the restaurant where a man sat near the hotel door, seemingly engrossed in his phone. With determined steps, she walked towards the table and stopped without bothering to sit down. The man looked up, spotted her, and flashed a wide smile. It took him a moment to realize there was a man behind her. When he noticed me, his smile vanished, and his eyes narrowed slightly. "Luke, this is my husband, Robert Morgan. He's concerned about our relationship, and after talking with him, I have to agree. For the first time in our marriage, I've given him reason to doubt my fidelity. I'll work hard to repair the breach of trust caused by my relationship with you. From now on, I want nothing to do with you. There's no reason for you to call, text, or otherwise communicate with me. I accept responsibility for getting our relationship to this point. Now, I've chosen to end it." My husband is aware of my regrettable actions at the Red Horse Bar. I'll do everything I can to salvage my relationship with him, including informing HR of the entire situation. Tomorrow, I'll let them know that any attempt to engage me in non-work-related conversation will be unwelcome. Now, I'll sit at the bar while my husband talks to you." As she turned away, she kissed me before I could react. She looked into my eyes for a moment and whispered, "I'm truly sorry." I couldn't help but glance at her as she walked up to the bar. Everything turned out even better than I had anticipated. Slipping into the seat opposite the embarrassed playboy, I couldn't resist sizing him up. Dark hair, slender build, impeccably dressed. He might be considered attractive, but I've never been good at judging men. He was probably around my height, although it was hard to tell while he was seated. I couldn't help but notice his lingering gaze on the glass of wine on the table across from him. That almost confirmed my suspicions. It's time to keep my cool. I roughly knew what I wanted, but I had to figure things out as I went along. Quick thinking wasn't my strong suit. "So you thought it'd be a surprise to find her in a bikini?" I said with a half smile. "Do you really believe she told you everything?" he responded with a grin. Now that this fool was in front of me, I felt composed. This was a problem I could handle. "Actually, yes. I've known this woman for 10 years, and I've been married to her for 8. I believe I understand her better than some cute guy who's been pursuing her for 3 months. I maintained a smile. The waiter approached and asked for my drink order. I requested a double Johnny Walker Black with ice. "She certainly knows how to please a man," he remarked, still attempting to grin. He glanced at the glass of wine he had already ordered for her. "Yes, that's true this time." I grinned broadly at him. "But I don't think you're speaking from experience. Need photographs?" he joked, laughing. This guy was trying to provoke me. I felt the urge to reach across the counter, but instead, I laughed. "You don't have photographs. If she had gone that far with you, you wouldn't need to slip something in her drink. What are wannabe rapists using these days? Gamma-hydroxybutyrate, Rohypnol, or just good old ecstasy?" It was a guess, but his shocked expression dispelled any doubts. He flinched as I leaned across the table towards him. Now, I was genuinely furious. "You despicable coward! I should thrash you right here and now, but I'm not sure I won't end up eliminating you. I don't want to end up in jail at this moment." I gave my wife 3 options, and now I'm giving you 3 options. I jabbed my finger under his nose. "First, you're leaving. Right now, you'll go and apologize to my wife, and tomorrow you'll resign from your job. I promise not to pursue you. Then, you'll leave the city." I raised another finger. "Second, you go to the police and confess to medicating my wife's drink. Serve your sentence and stay away from my wife. I'll keep an eye on you, but I won't come after you. Then, you'll leave the city." I raised a third finger. "Third, I signed both of us up for boxing classes in 4 weeks. You and I will step into the ring, sign injury waivers, and neither of us will leave until we pass out. And when you wake up, you still leave my wife alone. Then, you'll leave the city." The waiter brought my scotch just as I finished. I took a long sip and felt the burn. It was time to regain composure. "You must think I'm a fool. Why would I agree to any of these options?" He smirked. I gave him what I hoped was a menacing grin. Because you don't want to spend the rest of your pathetic life looking over your shoulder. Every time you walk to your car at night, you'll wonder if I or one of my friends is lurking, ready to break your legs and crush your manhood with a baseball bat. Every time you answer the door, you won't know if I or one of my pals will barge in, tie you up, and castrate you. Every time you go to a bar, you'll worry if I or one of my buddies will spike your drink and subject you to unspeakable acts before maiming your manhood. You won't risk it. You're a coward, or so your wife claimed, after I had my way with her last night. His face regained color. I took another sip of whiskey, then reached into my pocket and activated the voice recorder on my phone. I hoped he would document our conversation. I really should have planned this evening better. You were planning to medicate me wife and assault her, you pervert. Are you willing to gamble a lifetime of agony on me not following through? It was time to reel him in. The medicators were just to get her in the mood for when my friends arrived. We were planning to have our way with her tonight. My composure vanished altogether. I managed to grab him by the collar with my left hand and pull him towards me. Unable to slap too hard with my right hand due to being seated, I heard a satisfying crunch and felt his nose give way. He yelled, holding his nose, threatening to call the cops. In response, I told him to go ahead, calling him a jackass, and expressing my desire for the authorities to medicate, test the remaining wine in my glass, and listen to the tape of him confessing. The police responded to the disturbance in 10 minutes. Apparently, 2 officers were having lunch at the nearby subway. They took my statement and collected the remaining wine and glass for analysis. They searched Luke and found a packet of white powder. He requested a lawyer and refused to speak further. They listened to my recording and confiscated my phone as evidence. It was a struggle, but you could hear Luke discussing medicates and a planned assault. It was nearly 4 a.m. before Sharon and I were allowed to leave the police station. After her statement, one of the officers spent almost 15 minutes praising me and emphasizing how I prevented her from being assaulted. By the end, she was utterly shattered. Luke remained in police custody. We used her phone to quickly inform my parents of everything. They understood and promised to take care of Casey, deciding to take her to the zoo. As we pulled into the garage and switched off the car, we exchanged glances. She released her seatbelt and enveloped me across the console in a tight hug. I allowed her to cry on my shoulder for about a minute before gently guiding her away. Sharon, we still need to have a conversation, but it's late and we should get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll both go to work and spend the day together sorting things out. How does that plan sound to you? Yes, Bob. Getting into bed sounds wonderful, she responded softly, then added, May I please sleep beside you? Of course, baby. The following morning, I woke up and snuggled closer to her. Reflecting on the events of the previous night, I dared to hope that everything might turn out all right. However, I knew we still had a few discussions ahead before making any decisions. My hand rested on her stomach, and she brought it up to her chest. I felt a surge of emotion, but knew I needed to slow things down. Sitting up in bed, I playfully smacked one of her flawless backside. Get up. Let's take a walk. I don't want to have a serious conversation on an empty stomach, I suggested. Eventually, we ended up showering together, which did little more than expedite our morning routine. Despite the temptation, I wasn't ready to be in bed until we resolved our issues. We enjoyed breakfast at the International House of Pancakes, chatting about Casey and her upcoming fun time with my parents. We managed to keep the conversation light and upbeat. After finishing our last cup of coffee, we settled the bill and returned home, sitting down at the kitchen table to face each other. Okay, I think I'll start, I began. You can see for yourself what kind of person Luke is, so I won't dwell on that. He claimed you satisfied him and called me a teddy bear after sleeping with him a few days ago. Is that true? No. The worst encounter I had with him was that awful night at the Red Horse. I understand the gravity of my actions, but I never went further, she replied. How can I believe you? You lied about going on a date with him last night, and you lied and omitted details about that bar incident. Not to mention your entire relationship with him, I expressed, feeling it was time to be transparent. I've been pondering this, and I think I have a suggestion, I continued. What about a polygraph test? She asked. Do you mean a lie detector test? I clarified. She nodded. Yes, Schedule 1. Ask me anything you want. Just let me know the time and place. Her genuine expression was striking. I understand these tests aren't foolproof, but I'd feel much better if you went ahead and told the truth. I'll see what I can arrange. It might take some time to set up, but it's worth considering, I responded. Actually, it might take longer than expected, I added. She smiled. That's a good starting point. We can revisit the extent of your involvement later. But my next question will likely be the toughest. It's what hurts me the most and has the biggest impact on our relationship. How do we move forward? The incident with the underwear embarrassed you, and I get that. I don't like it, but I understand. It's hard for me to deal with the fact that you got close to another guy without telling me. But if you thought it was just a platonic friendship, I can understand. What I can't understand, and what makes me want to walk away before I get hurt again, is when you said you were seeing other girls when you were actually meeting him for dinner. A blatant lie disregarding the consequences. But it broke my heart when you said you were dating other people. I know there were tears in my eyes, but I felt powerless. Bob, all I can do is explain what I was thinking at the time. First, I want to say how sorry I am for lying to you about everything. When you took on that project for the first time since we've been together, I felt like I wasn't a priority. I'm not blaming you or your work. I understand why you took it on and how important it was to you. I'm just expressing how I felt. I started feeling down, and then my sister Vicky said something that stuck with me. She suggested finding romance elsewhere. I never saw it as cheating on you. I realized that while you were busy with the project, I might find what I needed elsewhere. And then Luke came along. I didn't fully realize it, but he made me feel special. He asked about my day, my family, my interests. Our conversations were mostly about me. She sighed, watching my reaction, which I tried to conceal. When Vicky confronted me at lunch, I realized what I was doing. I was using Luke to fulfill what I felt I couldn't get from you. But I still wanted to work things out with you. The night things got out of hand. I didn't invite him or his friends. They showed up before my other friends did. Luke bought drinks, including for me. I ended up more intoxicated than I've ever been with you. I've made some terrible mistakes that you know about. But then we had an incredible night, which confused me even more. How could I act so promiscuously with him but then have such wonderful moments with you? She stood up to pour herself some water, drinking half before continuing. Then the video surfaced. I knew you'd be furious, rightfully so. If you got drunk and kissed another woman, I'd be furious too. And I knew it would be worse, because after our passionate encounter, you'd wonder if I was thinking of someone else. So I made another mistake. I tried to involve Luke to cover it up. Perhaps he encouraged it, then made sure I knew. I felt obligated to help him out, and he wanted to take me to dinner when my friends couldn't. I was lonely, thinking you wouldn't be home until late. In a moment of weakness, I made a terrible choice, and I'm truly sorry. Our relationship has always been built on trust, and I broke it. Tears streamed down her face, though she didn't sob. "Oh my God," I said, standing to embrace her. I kissed her tenderly, then pulled back. "We're not there yet, and it'll take time. But if you're fully committed, so am I." Sharon and I attended counseling for some time. Discussing my issues helped me overcome them. The significant outcome for me was that, given communication has been a strength since our first encounter, we continue to work on it. Additionally, the counselor recommended Sharon undergo testing for hormonal imbalances. At 31, it seemed premature to worry about this, but it proved to be worthwhile. Following several tests and a switch in birth control pills, she experienced improvement. Though we're not entirely back to where we were, we're in a good place again. The polygraph test confirmed her honesty in all the challenging questions I posed. While there's still a lingering doubt about the accuracy of these tests in my mind, I can accept it. I decided to enroll in boxing lessons, while Sharon became intrigued by the self-defense classes offered there. Thursday nights for her turned into self-defense evenings. Sharon suggested we join martial arts classes where she excels, and I struggle to keep up. Sparring has become our favorite form of foreplay. The project was completed 6 weeks ahead of schedule and under budget. My company now competes with major players in government contracts. Although they wanted to promote me to vice president, I declined due to excessive travel requirements. Instead, I established the Special Projects Department and lead it now. This came with a new office and a secretary assistant. My new assistant has a stunning figure and a dazzling smile, and she fulfills my needs perfectly. Thus far, there haven't been any complaints about my wife and me working together. As long as we bring in revenue, I doubt anyone will raise objections. Most of the $38,000 ASAWI bonus from my initial project went towards Casey's college fund. However, I had saved enough for a week-long, all-inclusive resort vacation with my wife. My parents are prepared to return my daughter when we get back. I received an assault charge for punching Luke. Despite this, it's the most fulfilling $300 and 40 hours of community service I've ever completed. Luke will serve 3 to 5 years for attempted maltreatment and possession of a controlled substance. The substance turned out to be gamma-hydroxybutyrate. Additionally, he was assaulted while walking to his car in the evening, but it wasn't by me. Evidently, one of his previous sufferer's brothers caught up with him. The assailant will serve 2 to 3 years for the attack. I deposit $50 monthly into his prison commissary account.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name's David, and I've got quite the story to share. I'm 31 and have been married to my wonderful wife, Priya, for 4 years. She's 29, Indian, and honestly, she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Life was pretty sweet. We had a cozy little house in a quiet neighborhood. I work in construction, and Priya teaches at the local elementary school. On weekdays, we'd both come home tired but content. Priya loves cooking and would whip up something delicious for dinner, saying it helps her unwind. As for me, I'd usually tinker with my truck in the garage or catch a game on TV. Weekends were our special time. We'd sleep in, enjoy a leisurely breakfast, and maybe tackle some yard work together. Priya has a green thumb and loves planting new flowers and vegetables while I mow the lawn and fix things around the house. It was simple, but it made us happy. Then one day, new neighbors moved in next door, Sam and Samantha. They introduced themselves as. They were an older couple, probably in their 40s. At first, I didn't think much of it. New neighbors are just part of life. But little did I know, I was in for quite the surprise. From the very first time we met Sam and Samantha, I felt something was off. Samantha was loud and bossy, with poor Sam barely getting a word in. She would constantly call out, "Sam, get the boxes." Or, "Sam, did you remember to call the cable company?" And Sam? He'd just nod and do whatever she said. I couldn't help but think, sheesh, glad that's not me. But then there was Priya. She seemed fascinated by Samantha and started chatting with her more and more. At first, I didn't think much of it. Priya's always been sweet and traditional, like many Indian women. She believes in taking care of her man, you know? Then one day, Priya decided to share her perspective. "Hi there. I'm Priya, Alan's wife. I guess I should tell you my side of things, huh?" When Samantha first moved in next door, I was curious. She was so different from anyone I had ever met. Growing up in India and then moving here when I was 7, I always tried to be the good girl, respectful, quiet, doing what was expected. But Samantha? Wow, she was like a force of nature. The first time we really talked, she invited me over for coffee. Her house was a mess, with boxes everywhere and stuff piled on tables. But Samantha didn't seem to care about the mess. She just laughed and said, "Who has time to unpack when there's life to live?" We sat in her cluttered kitchen, sipping coffee and chatting. Samantha shared stories about her job as a marketing executive, detailing how she fought her way up the corporate ladder. "Never let anyone tell you what you can't do," she emphasized, "especially not a man." I remember feeling a mix of excitement and fear, maybe both. It was as if Samantha was opening a door to a world I never knew existed. As we spent more time together, she would say things that made me think deeply. She talked about how marriage should be a partnership, not a hierarchy, and how women shouldn't be expected to handle all the housework simply because they're women. At first, I would nod and smile, but then I began to wonder, was she right? Was I letting David take advantage of me? I love cooking and taking care of our home, but should I be doing more? Should I be more? I started trying to adopt some of Samantha's mindset, speaking up more and asking David to pitch in around the house. It felt strange, but I was curious about this new perspective. It was uncomfortable, but also kind of thrilling, you know? But then I'd glance at Sam, Samantha's husband, and he always seemed so sad and defeated. Was that what happened when women took charge? I didn't want that for David. I love him so much, and the thought of making him unhappy really hurt. I was so confused. Part of me wanted to be strong and independent like Samantha, but another part missed the easy comfort David and I had always shared. I didn't know what to do. Should I go back to being the old Priya? Or should I keep trying to embrace this new identity? It felt like I was being pulled in 2 different directions at once. And then, well, things started to get really messy at home. Like, really weird. At first, it was just small things, you know? Priya started making comments that didn't sound like her at all. One day, I was chilling on the couch after work, and she casually said, "You know, Samantha says men should do their fair share of housework." I laughed it off, but looking back, that should have been my first clue. Then things escalated. Priya began leaving dishes in the sink, claiming she was too tired to clean up. This was from the woman who used to freak out if there was even a speck of dust on the counter. I get that she was tired, but this felt different. It was as if she was trying to prove a point or something. One Saturday, while I was in the garage working on my truck, Priya came out with this serious look on her face, like she was gearing up for a fight. "David," she said, "I think we need to talk about dividing up the chores more evenly." I nearly dropped my wrench. Divide the chores? Since when was that an issue? I tried to reason with her. "Babe," I said, "you know I work long hours at the construction site. I'm beat when I get home." But she wasn't having it. She went on about how her job as a teacher was just as demanding and how she needed her time, too. Where was all this coming from? It wasn't just about housework either. Priya started questioning every decision I made. If I wanted to grab a beer with the guys after work, she'd give me the third degree. "Why do you need to go out? Don't you want to spend time with me?" It felt like I couldn't do anything right anymore. Our conversations started feeling like minefields. I'd say something innocent and boom, she'd blow up. One time, I complimented her on a new dress, telling her she looked sexy. You'd think I'd insulted her grandmother or something. She went off about how I should appreciate her for her mind, not her body. Since when was a compliment from her husband a bad thing? The worst part was that I could see Samantha's influence all over this. Priya started using terms like patriarchy and gender roles. That wasn't my wife talking. That was Samantha using Priya like some kind of puppet. I tried to talk to Priya about it, but she'd just get defensive. "Samantha's opening my eyes," she'd say. "Maybe you should try listening to her too." Yeah, right. Like I wanted to end up a beaten-down shell of a man like Sam. Things finally came to a head one night after a particularly nasty argument, probably about something stupid, like leaving the toilet seat up. I was so frustrated that I decided to sleep on the couch. But when I went to grab a pillow from our bedroom, the door was locked. I stood there, staring at that closed door, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. In all our years together, Priya had never locked me out. Never. I knocked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Priya, open the door." No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. "Priya, come on. This is ridiculous." Still nothing. That's when I lost it. I don't know what came over me, but before I knew it, I kicked that door right off its hinges. It crashed to the floor with a sound like a gunshot. Priya was sitting on the bed, her eyes wide with shock. For a moment, we just stared at each other, and then I let her have it. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I yelled. "Locking me out of my own bedroom? In my own house? The house I pay for?" Priya tried to say something, but I was on a roll. "I've had it with this crap, Priya. I'm sick of walking on eggshells in my own home. I'm sick of you treating me like I'm the enemy. I'm your husband, for Christ's sake." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Look, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this isn't you. This isn't us. And I'm not going to stand for it anymore. You want to act like Samantha? Fine. But don't expect me to stick around and be your punching bag like Sam." With that, I grabbed my pillow and stormed out, leaving Priya sitting there in stunned silence. As I lay on the couch that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Was this really the end of our marriage? And if it was, how the hell had we gotten here? Oh gosh, where do I even start? That night, when David kicked down the door, I'd never been so scared in my life. Not of David. He'd never hurt me, but of what I'd done to our marriage. After he left the room, I just sat there on the bed, shaking. What was I doing? This wasn't me. I'd never locked David out before, never even thought about it. But lately, it felt like I wasn't in control of my own actions. I couldn't sleep that night, just lay there replaying everything in my head. Part of me wanted to run after him, to apologize, to fix things. But another part, the part that had been listening to Samantha, was furious. How dare he break down the door? This was my room too, right? The next few days were really strange. David and I had always talked about everything, but now it felt like I was living with a stranger. We'd pass each other in the hallway, and it was just nothing. No good morning. No how was your day? Nothing. But I couldn't bring myself to apologize, not yet. There was this stubborn part of me that thought I should stand my ground. So when David stormed out of the room, I didn't follow. Instead, I gave him the silent treatment. It felt childish, but I didn't know what else to do. For the next few days, our house felt like a war zone. We barely spoke, barely looked at each other. I slept in the guest room and made my own meals. I told myself I was being strong and independent. But every night, I cried myself to sleep, missing the warmth of David's arms around me. I was so confused. Part of me wants to run to David and beg for forgiveness, but another part, the part influenced by Samantha, keeps telling me to hold out, to not give in. It's tearing me apart inside. What happened to the happy couple we used to be? How did we end up here? As the days pass, I start to realize how much damage I've done. But I'm too proud and too scared to make the first move. So I wait, hoping David will break the silence, praying it's not too late to fix what I've broken. Enough is enough. After days of this cold war with Priya, I can't take it anymore. This isn't us. This isn't the marriage I signed up for. It's time to put an end to this nonsense. I find Priya in the kitchen, doing dishes. She's been avoiding me like the plague, but not anymore. I plant myself in the doorway, making sure she can't slip away. Priya, I say, keeping my voice level. This ends now. You're sleeping in our bed tonight. I'm not living with a roommate. I want my wife back. I see her stiffen, but she doesn't argue. Good. That's a start. That night, we sleep in the same bed for the first time in days. We don't touch or talk, but at least we're in the same room. The next morning, I decide it's time for a real talk. I sit Priya down at the kitchen table. No more beating around the bush. Look, I say, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this isn't working. I married you because I wanted a partner, not someone who's constantly trying to prove something. That's not the Priya I fell in love with. I can see the tears welling up in her eyes, but I press on. This needs to be said. I love you, Priya, but if you can't be my wife, if you can't respect me and our marriage, then maybe we need to rethink things. That does it. The dam breaks, and Priya starts sobbing. Between hiccups, she tells me everything about Samantha's influence, how confused she's been, and how she let a stranger almost ruin the best thing in her life. I'm so sorry, she cries. I don't want to be that person. I want us back. I pull her into my arms, feeling a lump in my throat. We stay like that for a long time, just holding each other. When I finally find my voice, it comes out gruff with emotion. We can fix this, I tell her. But things need to change. No more of this feminist crap. No more letting other people tell you how our marriage should be. It's just us, Priya. You and me. You need to remember one thing. You are a teacher, and kids look up to you. They learn from you. If you poison their minds, imagine the consequences. She nods against my chest, and I feel like I can breathe again for the first time in weeks. We spend the rest of the day talking, really talking, about what we both want and how we'd let things get so messed up. It's not easy. We've both said and done things that hurt, but we're committed to making it work. Priya promises to cut ties with Samantha, cold turkey. No explanations, no goodbyes. I'm relieved. That woman was poison to our marriage. It takes time, but slowly, things start getting back to normal. Better than normal, actually. We appreciate each other more now. We know what we almost lost, and we're not taking it for granted again. I've got my Priya back, my sweet, loving wife. And I'm never letting anyone come between us again. That's a promise. It's been a few months since our big blowout, and man, what a ride it's been. Priya and I are stronger than ever now, but getting here wasn't easy. After our big talk, we had to rebuild, and trust doesn't come back overnight. We put in the effort every day to truly listen to each other and be present. Priya stuck to her promise of cutting Samantha out of her life, which was tough at first since she had grown used to having that friendship nearby. But we both recognized it was necessary. That woman was like a weed in our marriage that needed to be pulled out by the roots. Looking back, I realize how easily things could have spiraled out of control. If I hadn't stood my ground, or if Priya hadn't acknowledged her mistakes, we might not be here today, happy and together. We were fortunate to catch ourselves before falling off the cliff. Not everyone gets that chance. So, we're grateful and determined not to waste it. Nowadays, our home is filled with love and laughter again. Priya is back to cooking up a storm and singing in the kitchen like she used to. I'm feeling like the king of my castle again. At night, when we're curled up together on the couch or in bed, I count my lucky stars that we made it through. Because this is what marriage is truly about, a partnership, a team. And Priya and I, we're the best team there is. Now for the second story. My name is Ethan, and here is my story. It had been almost 3 years since Emma and I started dating, and a few months ago, we took the big step of moving in together. I still remember my college graduation day 6 years ago, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves about what lay ahead. Little did I know that hard work and a bit of luck would lead me to where I am now. 2 promotions in 3 years and a salary that sometimes makes me do a double take when I check my bank statement. Buying this place was a dream come true. I had always wanted a space to call my own, somewhere I could build a life. So, when Emma and I decided she would move in, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. She graduated 2 years ago and has been working hard to establish herself in her career. Her salary of $30,000 is a solid start, especially given how tough the job market can be for recent graduates. Before Emma moved in, we sat down for an open conversation about our finances. Given the difference in our incomes and the fact that this is my place, we agreed that I would cover the mortgage, utilities, and other household expenses. Emma would handle her personal expenses, things like spa treatments, clothes, her Netflix account, phone bill, and Spotify subscription. It's a setup that works well for us. I'm proud of what I've accomplished in my career, and I'm glad I can provide this living situation for us. Emma is making strides in her own career, and I'm excited to see where she goes from here. We're building our life together, step by step, and it feels great to be on this journey with her. Our financial arrangement might not work for everyone, but it suits us just fine. We discussed it thoroughly, set our boundaries, and we're committed to sticking to them. It's reassuring to know we can have these kinds of conversations openly and honestly. As we continue to grow together, I look forward to what the future holds for us. Now from Emma's side. Living with Ethan these past few months has been an eye-opener. At first, I felt like I'd hit the jackpot. No rent, no bills, just my paycheck to spend however I wanted. But now, I'm starting to see things differently. I've watched my friends move forward in their relationships, joint accounts, shared expenses, building a future together, while I still feel like a guest in Ethan's world. Sure, he makes good money, but isn't sharing a part of partnership? Last night, I decided it was time to change things up. We were in the kitchen, Ethan chopping vegetables for dinner while I leaned against the counter, scrolling through my phone. "We need to talk about money," I said, my tone firmer than I intended. Ethan's knife came to a halt mid-chop. "What about it?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "I'm always broke by the end of the month while you have money stashed away. I think we should combine our finances," I declared, crossing my arms. The look on his face was priceless, as if I'd suggested selling the apartment and moving to Mars. "You can't be serious," he sputtered. But I was. Dead serious. "Why not?" I pressed. "We're partners, right? Shouldn't we be sharing everything?" Ethan's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. "Emma, I pay for everything here. The mortgage, the bills, the groceries. You're living here for free." His words stung, but I stood my ground. "So what? You make way more than me. It's only fair that we level the playing field." The argument that followed was ugly. Words flew like daggers, and old resentments bubbled to the surface. Ethan kept reiterating how much he already provides and how I contribute nothing to our living expenses, as if my presence and companionship weren't contributions enough. "Do you have any idea how entitled you sound right now?" Ethan's voice rose, his face flushed with anger. But all I could think about was the lifestyle I could have if we shared his income, the trips we could take, the clothes I could buy, the life I could live. Why should he get to enjoy all that money alone? "It's not entitlement," I shot back. "It's about equality in our relationship." Ethan's laughter was cold. "Equality? You want to talk about equality when you're not paying a dime towards our life together?" I felt my temper flare. How dare he make me feel small just because he earns more? "You're the one who offered to cover the expenses," I reminded him sharply. "Yeah, the household expenses," he retorted. "Not bankroll your entire life." The fight dragged on, neither of us willing to back down. In the end, we went to bed angry, the issue unresolved. But I'm not letting this go. I've had a taste of the good life, and I'm not about to give it up. Ethan needs to understand that being a couple means sharing everything, including his fat paycheck. He'll come around. He has to, because I'm not settling for anything less than what I deserve. And what I deserve is an equal share of everything he has. Let's check Ethan's side. I couldn't sleep last night. Emma's words kept echoing in my head, each repetition stoking the embers of my anger. How could she demand we combine our finances? The audacity of it all left me reeling. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my initial fury began to cool, replaced by a nagging urge to understand. What was driving Emma to make such an outrageous request? I found myself picking apart our relationship, examining every interaction, every offhand comment about money. It hit me then. Could this be about jealousy? I thought back to the times Emma would eye my wallet, or the way her gaze would linger on the designer stores we'd pass in the mall. Despite covering all our living expenses, I still had more disposable income than her. Was that the root of all this? I rolled onto my side, watching Emma's sleeping form. Her closet was bursting with new clothes, shoes piled high in the corner. Just last week, she come home with another haul of makeup and skincare products, excitedly showing me each item. At the time, I'd smiled, happy to see her happy. Now, I couldn't help but wonder how much it had all cost. It dawned on me that despite her rent-free living, Emma always seemed to be broke by month's end. Where was her money going? I mentally tallied up her expenses, the weekly spa treatments, the constant stream of packages from online shopping, the nights out with friends. It all added up to a picture of poor financial management. The realization left a sour taste in my mouth. If we combined our finances as she wanted, would my hard-earned money be frittered away on more impulse purchases and luxury items? The thought made my stomach churn. I've always believed in working hard for what you want, in being responsible with money. My parents instilled those values in me from a young age. But Emma seemed to have a different outlook. She appeared to view money as something to be spent freely, without thought for the future. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the curtains, I found myself facing a harsh truth. This wasn't just about combining finances. This was about a fundamental difference in how we view money, responsibility, and partnership. I thought about all those stories you hear about relationships falling apart due to financial issues. Was that us now? Had we turned into just another statistic, a cautionary tale about the risks of unequal financial contributions in a relationship? The weight of it all pressed down on me. I love Emma, but I can't ignore the red flags anymore. Her demand isn't just unreasonable. It's a potential threat to everything I've worked for. If I gave in, would it ever be enough? Or would I always be expected to fund an increasingly expensive lifestyle while she contributes nothing? As I made my way through the workday, my mind kept drifting back to last night's argument. The numbers on my screen blurred as I found myself questioning not just our financial situation, but our entire relationship. I thought about the day I'd asked Emma to move in. I had been so excited, so sure it was the right move. Now I wondered if I had been naive. Had I mistaken infatuation for compatibility? The more I mulled it over, the more I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about values, goals, and maturity. During my lunch break, I walked to the park across from my office. As I watched couples stroll by hand in hand, I tried to remember the last time Emma and I had done something like that. When was the last time we'd had a conversation about our future that didn't revolve around her wants? As I sat there, I felt a growing unease. Was I truly happy? The question caught me off guard, but once asked, it demanded an answer. I thought about my life goals, building a stable future, maybe starting a family someday. Then I considered Emma's focus on immediate gratification and her lack of concern for tomorrow. The gap between us suddenly seemed vast. While I'd been growing, taking on responsibilities, and planning for the future, Emma seemed stuck in a post-college mindset, living for the moment and expecting others to foot the bill. I recalled my friends who'd warned me about moving too fast. Make sure you're on the same page financially, they'd said. I had brushed it off, thinking love would be enough. Now their words echoed in my head, a warning I'd failed to heed. Sitting back at my desk, I realized I had some serious thinking to do. This wasn't just about whether to combine our finances. It was about whether we even had a future together. The thought was daunting, but I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I've learned a hard lesson through all this. While generosity is admirable, without clear boundaries and shared values, it can quickly turn into exploitation. As I left the office, I silently vowed never to let myself be taken advantage of again, no matter how much I care for someone. It was time to put myself first and ensure that any relationship I pursue is genuinely equal and mutually beneficial. Now let's check Emma's side. I can't believe this is happening. When Ethan sat me down for a talk, I thought maybe he'd finally come around about combining our finances. Instead, he hit me with a breakup speech, something about misaligned values and unequal effort. I barely heard half of it over the sound of my world crashing down. Make your own arrangements and move out, he said, his voice steady but his eyes avoiding mine. This isn't working anymore. I couldn't accept it. I wouldn't. You can't do this to me, I said, tears welling up. Where am I supposed to go? What about all our plans? But Ethan just shook his head, unmoved. I'm sorry, Emma. You're a spender, whereas I'm a saver. Our goals aren't aligned and will never be. I tried everything. Reminded him of all our good times, promised I'd change, even threatened to tell everyone he was kicking me out on the street. Nothing worked. Ethan's face remained impassive, like I was talking to a stranger. Realizing he wouldn't budge, I called my friend Lily. She agreed to let me crash at her place. As I packed my things, the reality of the situation hit me hard. This was really happening. I spent that first night at Lily's crying and raging. How could Ethan do this to me? Didn't the last 3 years mean anything? I poured my heart out on social media, letting everyone know how cruelly I'd been treated. I texted Ethan constantly, begging, accusing, apologizing. When he didn't respond, I even got our mutual friends to reach out. But he blocked us all, cutting me off completely. Days passed in a blur of anger and despair. Then, unexpectedly, my dad called. He sounded disappointed. He said he'd spoken to Ethan and gotten the full story. "Honey," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "I think you need to let this go. Ethan's made his decision." I couldn't believe it. My own father was taking Ethan's side. "But Dad," I protested. "He just threw me out. How can you?" "He cut you off, Emma. Listen to me. You had a good thing with Ethan. A rent-free place to live, no bills to worry about, and you pushed for more. It's time to learn from this and grow up a little." His words stung, but deep down, I knew he was right. I had taken Ethan for granted, assuming he would always be there no matter what. Now, sitting in Lily's spare room, surrounded by hastily packed boxes, I realized just how much I'd lost. The comforts of our shared life, the plans we had made, all seemed to slip through my fingers like sand. The reality of my situation was sobering. I had to confront my mistakes and figure out how to move forward. It was time to reflect on what I truly wanted and how to make it happen without relying on anyone else. Now let's check Ethan's side of the story. It's been a month since Emma moved out, and I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. The apartment feels quieter, emptier in some ways, but there's a sense of peace I hadn't realized I was missing. The first few days were tough. I'd catch myself turning to share a thought or a joke, only to remember she wasn't there. But as the days passed, I noticed a change. My shoulders felt lighter, and my mind clearer. I've started picking up old hobbies I had let slide. Last weekend, I dusted off my camera and spent the day photographing the city. It felt good to create something just for me, without worrying about anyone else's expectations. Sure, there are moments when I miss the companionship, like family dinners with Emma's parents or our Sunday morning coffee ritual. But then I remember the constant tension and the feeling of being taken for granted, and I know I made the right choice. Looking back, I can see how much I compromised myself in that relationship. I let my own needs and values take a back seat, all in the name of keeping the peace. Never again. This experience has taught me the true value of self-respect. It's not always easy to stand up for yourself, especially when it means letting go of someone you care about. But in the end, it's the only way to live a life that's truly your own. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
The restaurant was cozy and warm, filled with the soft hum of light jazz and dim enough to conceal secrets in every corner. Kathy sat by the window, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her wine glass. Across from her, Roger, her new friend, or perhaps something more, wore a casual, confident grin that made her heart race. Tonight, he had brought her to this quiet, hidden spot in the city, where the risk of running into someone who might recognize her felt minimal, or so she believed. Kathy had gone the extra mile with her makeup, double-checking every detail before their meeting because she understood the impact of looking flawless. When Roger excused himself to use the restroom, she fixed a stray hair and patted her lips to ensure her lipstick was intact. But as the minutes passed, a thought crept into her mind. Roger was taking a little too long. She tried to dismiss it as nerves, yet a slight chill ran down her spine that she couldn't shake off. Her phone buzzed softly, breaking her from her thoughts. She glanced down and felt her heart skip a beat. Ben, her husband, was calling. The unexpected call took her by surprise, especially since he was supposed to be at work. Clearing her throat, Kathy lifted the phone and answered in her sweetest tone. "Yes, honey?" Ben's voice was calm but carried an edge she couldn't quite identify. "Where are you right now?" A bead of sweat formed at her temple, and she quickly laughed it off. "I'm on a date. Just kidding," she replied, trying to sound playful. "I'm just catching up with some friends from the conservatory, honey." There was a brief silence before he replied. "Unfortunately, it's not a joke. Turn around." The words echoed in her ears, sharp and clear. She froze, her heart pounding, and slowly turned her head. There, in the dim light of the restaurant, at a table in the corner, was Ben. He gave her a slow wave, his expression unreadable. Her throat went dry as she took a shaky breath, gripping her phone tightly. "Ben, why are you here? Why aren't you at work?" Ben's tone remained calm. "Change of plans. I thought I'd grab a quick bite, but imagine my surprise when I saw my own wife sitting here with some guy, looking a little too cozy." His voice was steady, but his words hit Kathy like a punch. Her pulse quickened as she scrambled for an excuse. "Wait, what? You're misunderstanding. You think I'm on a date? What about you? You're sitting with that pretty woman over there." Ben chuckled softly. "That's Maria, Kathy." My lawyer. Kathy's heart plummeted, leaving her grasping for words. She refused to let Ben or his lawyer get the best of her. Taking a steadying breath, she straightened her shoulders and, with a hint of a smile, made her way over to their table. The sound of her heels clicked softly on the floor as she approached, and she took her seat next to them, summoning all the calm she could muster. Well, hello there, she said politely, giving Maria a small nod. Maria, right? Maria nodded back, looking composed, though her gaze was sharp and steady. Kathy wasted no time. She turned to Ben, her voice sweet but edged with challenge. Honey, I have to ask, what's going on here? Why are you having dinner with a lawyer? Did something happen that you haven't told me about? Ben looked at her, a small, unreadable smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Well, Kathy, he said slowly, I suppose you could say I'm in a rather unpleasant situation. It's kind of embarrassing, really. He leaned back, looking between her and Maria, shaking his head. I never thought I'd be here, sitting with my lawyer, but here I am. You know, I just hope I'm not getting fitted for reindeer antlers this Christmas. His voice remained calm, but his eyes were hard. Kathy felt her cheeks flush, but forced herself to smile, keeping her tone light. That sounds awful, honey, Kathy replied, turning to Maria with a small laugh. What do you think, Maria? Imagine that your husband, who says he works the night shift, is actually secretly spying on you. A little paranoid, don't you think? Maria's smile was smooth, her eyes giving nothing away. Oh, trust me, life has a way of surprising us, which is why I'm here to help couples through times like these. Kathy let out a soft chuckle, though her heart raced. So, a divorce lawyer, huh? Well, Ben, I'd hate to see you jump to conclusions. It's just dinner with an old friend, you know? She looked back at Ben, the smile never leaving her face. A little impulsive of you, don't you think? Ben took a long, slow sip from his glass, his eyes steady on Kathy. When he set it down, he gave her a calm, almost amused smile. Kathy, you know I'm a calm, rational man. I don't make decisions on a whim. I prefer to think with a clear head. He leaned forward, his gaze piercing. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about Roger? Is he a friend? Or maybe something more? Kathy didn't miss a beat, her own smile steady. Ben, please, I've told you already. Roger is a friend from the conservatory. He's a brilliant pianist. She shrugged, keeping her tone light. We just happened to meet up tonight in this beautiful place to talk about music. You know how creative people like us, musicians, artists, tend to be a little more expressive. But that's all it is. Ben raised an eyebrow and let out a small chuckle. I suppose I should hope his hands stay on the piano keys, right? Kathy laughed, waving her hand. Maria, you might want to note how your client here loves to provoke. Honestly, Ben, that innuendo is pretty bold. Maria simply shrugged, watching the exchange closely, but without much reaction. Ben's expression turned more serious, though a slight smile remained. So, Kathy, he said, his voice calm but firm. You're telling us that you and Roger are just friends? No intimate involvement? Kathy looked from Ben to Maria and back to Ben, a playful glint in her eye. Ben, we're just friends, pure and simple. Unless, of course, Maria here considers a love of music a reason to file a suit for infidelity. She laughed, glancing at Maria, who chuckled and shook her head. Oh, I wouldn't go that far, Kathy, Maria said, smiling. I think I can handle the situation without getting too dramatic. Ben smirked, clearly amused. This whole scene struck him as almost funny. Her quick defenses, her breezy responses. All right, honey, but you know I'd love to hear what Roger thinks of your friendly relationship. He leaned back, crossing his arms. It would be interesting to get his take on things. Kathy kept her chin up, her voice steady. Of course, Ben, she replied. Once Roger's back, I'm sure he'll back me up. Not sure why he's taking so long, though. She forced a little smile, though her fingers tightened around her glass. Ben leaned back in his chair, pulling out his phone and tapping the screen. Kathy, we actually don't need Roger here. He might show up eventually, but I thought you'd prefer to hear what we have to say right now. He lifted his phone slightly, his expression unreadable. It turned out that Ben had gone into the restroom with Roger, and they had a man-to-man conversation. With a tap, a recording began to play. Kathy and Maria exchanged quick glances, both bracing themselves for what was about to unfold. First, Ben's voice came through. Hey, man, is that cute redhead over there your friend? Roger's laugh was easygoing, a little too comfortable. You could say that, he replied. But what's it to you? Ben played along, keeping his voice light. I've just always been amazed at how easy some guys make it look to pick up women. Maybe you could give me some tips, huh? It doesn't come as naturally to me. Roger's laugh was low and smug. Oh man, I don't know if you can teach it. Some of us just have it, you know? Ben's voice then shifted to a more playful tone, but still pressing. Hey, so tell me, people say redheads are the hottest in bed. Is that true? You get anywhere with her? Roger didn't hesitate. He laughed, sounding almost proud. Oh, they're wild, all right? That one, man. She does things. Let's just say if I'm not careful, she might break me. She bounces like crazy. There was a moment of silence in the recording before Ben responded. Wow, lucky you. Roger chuckled again, sounding pleased with himself. Lucky? I'd say so. Just hoping she doesn't wear me out tonight. You know what I mean. Ben then thanked Roger for the conversation and wished him luck. Ben emerged from the restroom first, deliberately propping the door handle so Roger couldn't get out for a while. A little lesson for Roger to linger a bit longer. The recording ended, and the restaurant's background hum filled the sudden silence at their table. Kathy's cheeks flushed, her fingers curling tightly around her glass, but she quickly forced herself to sit up straighter, clearing her throat as she struggled to keep her expression composed. Maria's gaze was sharp, her lawyerly instincts taking in every reaction, while Ben watched Kathy with an amused, expectant look. Kathy forced a smile, though her voice wavered. Well, Ben, she began, trying to maintain her calm. I think Roger was just, showing off. Men say all kinds of things when they think they're bonding with each other. He's clearly just joking around. Ben raised an eyebrow, a slight smile curling at his lips. Joking? Huh? Sounds pretty detailed for a joke. But I'm all ears, Kathy. Go ahead, explain away. Kathy straightened up, forcing a small laugh despite her flushed face. Ben, really, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Roger is just a braggart. He loves to joke around and exaggerate. Honestly, the guy's got a wild imagination. He probably thought he was just being funny. She turned to Maria, hoping for an ally. Maria, can we really consider the wild claims of a guy who talks like an idiot as proof of anything? That's ridiculous. People say all kinds of things. Maria's expression didn't soften. She gave Kathy a tight-lipped smile, looking mildly entertained. I think I've seen enough for one night, Kathy. This isn't my usual kind of event, but I have to thank Ben for inviting me. It was eye-opening, she said with a nod toward Ben. Kathy's face grew tense, but before she could respond, she saw Roger standing and scanning the tables, looking frazzled and confused. Ben gave a polite smile. Looks like your friend is back, Kathy. I think he's looking for you. Kathy called out to him, and Roger rushed over, clearly frustrated, without even noticing Ben and Maria. Kathy, you won't believe it. Some idiot propped the restroom door shut. Had me stuck in there forever. He glanced around and then narrowed his eyes at Ben. It was you, wasn't it? Are you nuts? Ben merely raised an eyebrow, smiling, while Kathy gave Roger a pleading look. Roger, let me introduce you. This is Ben, my husband. Why don't you explain to him that you're just... But she never finished. Roger's face went pale as he finally put the pieces together, his expression turning to sheer panic. Oh, crap, he stammered, eyes wide. I think I just heard my phone ringing. Better go check on that. He gave a clumsy nod, then practically bolted to his table, snatching his things before darting out of the restaurant without looking back. Kathy stared after him, speechless, her face a mixture of shock and anger. Ben chuckled softly, shaking his head. Kathy, looks like Roger may be a decent lover, but he's a pretty unreliable friend. Seems he's not willing to stand by you in a tough spot. He glanced at Maria, then back to Kathy. Anyway, it's about time to settle up and head out, don't you think? Maria remarked as she rose from her chair, nodding in agreement while gathering her belongings. Ben gave Kathy one last glance and added with a half-smile, Oh, and honey, you'll be covering dinner with Roger out of your own pocket? Kathy's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to nod. She called over the waiter, pulling out her card and trying to maintain as much composure as possible. However, when the waiter swiped it, he frowned and shook his head. Sorry, ma'am, it's not working. Just then, Ben and Maria walked by on their way out. Kathy turned to Ben, her voice tense. Ben, my card isn't working. Did you do this? Are you really going to leave me here like this? Ben shrugged, glancing back with a feigned sympathetic smile. I didn't think it would be an issue, Kathy. I figured your friend would handle it. Damn it, Ben. Kathy hissed, her voice barely controlled. You're actually going to leave me here without any money? Ben's smile widened slightly. Come on, Kathy. You're a resourceful woman. I'm sure you'll figure something out. With that, he turned and walked out, Maria at his side. As they exited, Maria shot a glance at Kathy. Ben, I'll have the papers finalized by tomorrow morning, Maria said. Ben nodded, relieved. Thank you, he replied, letting out a breath as he prepared to go home while Kathy remained behind in the restaurant, left to face the bill and the fallout from the evening. When Ben arrived home, the weight of the day settled heavily on him. He moved through the house slowly, taking his time to toss a few essentials into a suitcase. Today had proven more challenging than he'd anticipated, and although he felt the urge to pack up everything tonight, he decided it could wait until tomorrow. A few days at his brother's place sounded like just what he needed. Barely an hour later, the front door swung open, and Kathy stormed in, her eyes flashing with frustration. She set her purse down with a thud and made her way toward him. Ben, what was that all about? She fumed. You had to make a cheap show out of everything, dragging your lawyer along and setting me up like that. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was? She threw her hands up, her words spilling out. And to leave me there without any way to pay? They were about to make me wash dishes or clean toilets. That's what they told me. Thank God my friend Angie came to help me out. Ben let out a tense, stressed laugh. More a reaction to his nerves than anything funny. It was a habit of his to laugh in stressful moments, but this time it seemed to hit Kathy the wrong way. What's so funny? She demanded. Ben raised a hand, trying to keep his voice even. Kathy, he began slowly. What instrument do you play? Kathy blinked, thrown off by the odd question. What? What does that have to do with anything? You know I play the flute, Ben. He looked at her, his smile twisting with a bitter edge. Then maybe you should go find your lover and play his skin flute. He gave a mocking bow, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Might suit you better. And please, leave me alone. Kathy's face reddened, her fists clenching at her sides. Ben, damn you. Are you serious? You bring that woman, your lawyer, to humiliate me, and now this? Do you want a divorce? You're just going to throw it all away because of some silly thing Roger said? You're so petty. Ben felt a sharp pang in his chest. Kathy, he said softly, I did love you once, and maybe you loved me too. We were a great couple. But he shook his head. Now it's clear this means nothing to you. So yeah, I want a divorce because my wife apparently wants to ride piano players. The words struck hard, and Kathy's face contorted with anger. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and hurled it across the room, aiming right for him. Go to hell, Ben. Stop insulting me. I don't deserve this, she yelled, her voice cracking. Ben's face tightened as his patience finally snapped. He picked up his sports bag, slung it over his shoulder, and looked back at her one last time. With a curt, polite bow, he turned and left the house without saying another word. The next morning, Kathy opened the door to find Maria standing there, a thick stack of papers in hand. Kathy's expression hardened as Maria held out the documents in silence. Without a word, Kathy snatched them up, her jaw clenched. Maria's calm, unbothered demeanor only fueled Kathy's determination. She didn't like to lose, ever. She considered herself smart and clever enough to navigate whatever Ben threw her way. As soon as Maria left, Kathy got to work. By that afternoon, she had already hired a well-regarded lawyer and started preparing her case. Her strategy was clear. Portray Ben as a jealous, overreacting husband. After all, she thought, he had only caught her having dinner with Roger, a friend and fellow musician. Maybe Ben had let his jealousy get out of hand. But as she mulled it over, a chill crept down her spine. How had Ben known about her meeting with Roger? She had been so careful, hadn't she? Kathy racked her brain, trying to remember if she had let anything slip, but came up empty. Pushing the thought aside, she felt confident that she could make this whole mess disappear in court. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. Kathy sat at the defendant's table, cool and collected. She and her lawyer had crafted a strong argument. Ben would be painted as a paranoid husband who had taken things too far. However, as the proceedings unfolded, her confidence began to falter. Ben's lawyer stepped forward with something Kathy hadn't anticipated: hard evidence. There were printed screenshots from Kathy's own phone, messages between her and Roger that went far beyond friendly chat. Her face flushed, and she hissed under her breath, "Damn it, Ben. You went through my phone. That's a complete violation of privacy." But it didn't stop there. Ben had one more ace up his sleeve: a witness. He called their neighbor, a retired man who lived across the street, to testify that he had seen Roger coming to the house one evening while Ben was working the night shift. Kathy's lawyer attempted to discredit the witness, but the damage was done. Ben's case was rock solid, and Kathy's defense unraveled. By the end of the trial, the verdict was clear. Ben had won. Afterward, Kathy managed to catch up to him in the courthouse hallway. She stepped in front of him, her voice softer than it had been in weeks. "Ben, please, can we talk? Maybe we don't have to end things like this. I made mistakes, but we had something special. Isn't there any way we could try again?" But Ben's expression remained cold, untouched by her plea. "Please, Kathy, you didn't just make mistakes. You lied. Even now, standing here, you're trying to twist things," he said, shaking his head. "I loved you, but betrayal is something I can't forgive." Kathy's face fell as she watched him turn and walk away, leaving her to confront the full weight of her choices. The game she had tried to play had come back to haunt her, and now there was nothing left to do but live with the consequences. 3 months after the trial, the finality of Kathy's situation set in. The divorce had been quick and unyielding, a stark reminder of how drastically her life had changed. Ben had been resolute, and Kathy found herself navigating a world that felt increasingly hostile. At first, she tried to maintain her composure, believing that she could still piece her life back together. But the reality of her dwindling savings and mounting bills soon crushed that hope. She lost her job at the music school, the director citing unprofessional behavior following the scandal. Without a steady income, she struggled to keep up with her mortgage payments. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary transformed into a prison of debt, each missed payment echoing in her mind. As the eviction notice arrived, Kathy stood in the living room, surrounded by boxes filled with her past. The walls felt like they were closing in, reminders of a life that no longer belonged to her. Friends who had once supported her began to distance themselves, some whispering behind closed doors about her fall from grace, while others simply didn't know how to react. With nowhere to go, Kathy sought refuge with a distant relative who reluctantly took her in. Living in cramped quarters only deepened her sense of isolation and shame. As she lay awake at night, the weight of her choices pressed down harder. The regret was suffocating, and she often thought back to the life she had with Ben, what it had felt like to be loved and secure. In her darkest moments, Kathy realized that she had lost more than just her job and her home. She had lost the man she had once vowed to cherish. The betrayal she had thought she could brush aside had not only cost her a marriage, but had also stripped away her identity. Now, she was left to confront a future that seemed bleak and uncertain, with the echoes of her past haunting her every step. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
While scanning the restaurant for the client I was meant to meet, I spotted my ex-wife, Susan, accompanied by a slightly overweight middle-aged man. It was evident he had once been in good shape, but the effects of indulgence and time had altered his physique. Susan sat beside him, radiating contentment. Every aspect of the man hinted at wealth. Standing in the foyer, memories came flooding back to me. Despite 3 years having passed since our divorce, the emotions felt as raw as if it were yesterday. This is how I found myself here, observing from afar rather than being by her side. Nonetheless, as events unfolded, her desires were fulfilled. My troubles began with a trip to Albany for a client meeting. Opting to stay overnight to avoid a lengthy drive back, my plans were disrupted when, barely an hour into the journey, the client called to report a broken fender, though he was undamaged. Apologizing for the late cancellation, he expressed his regret, to which I assured him it was no inconvenience, suggesting we reschedule. Nevertheless, I felt unprepared for the extra 2 hours of driving ahead. Promising to do my best, I planned to return home for a surprise romantic dinner with my beloved wife. 90 minutes later, I finally turned onto my street. The first thing that caught my eye was the presence of 3 unfamiliar cars parked in the driveway. Knowing my wife often invited her friends over when I was away, I didn't think much of it. I parked on the street and entered the house, assuming everything was normal. However, the sight of 4 sets of clothes strewn across the living room floor immediately signaled that something was amiss. As I stood there, a gut-wrenching realization hit me. My wife's passionate cry wasn't a call for help. It was a familiar plea for more intense lovemaking. My heart sank as I grasped the truth. My wife was engaged in a carnal encounter with someone else. Despite my reluctance, I knew I had to face the reality awaiting me upstairs. Upon reaching the top of the stairs, I was met with the sound of my wife emitting a primal scream. Stealthily peering around the bedroom doorframe, I beheld 3 men. While unfamiliar with 2 of them, the third was unmistakably her boss from work, Jeff Davis. To my shock, they had my wife engaged in carnal acts. My disdain for Jeff deepened as he showered her with praise, acknowledging her assistance with his business clients. It sickened me to realize that this idiot was exploiting my wife for his professional gain. All 3 of them treated her as a mere object of pleasure, using derogatory language and exerting their dominance over her. Witnessing her behavior so alien to the woman I knew during our 10 years of marriage, I couldn't help but agree with Jeff's choice of derogatory label for her. Quietly retreating, I slipped downstairs unnoticed, seeking refuge in my office. Retrieving my digital video camera, I found it still had some battery life. With an old holiday cassette inside and space for recording, I aimed to document my wife's actions for legal purposes rather than creating some illicit spectacle. Setting up the camera at the bedroom door, I captured footage of my wife's face and the others involved, managing to endure only 510 minutes of the ordeal before my emotions overwhelmed me. While some might find such a scene arousing, for me, it brought only sadness and a profound sense of betrayal. Feeling utterly deflated, I sought solace downstairs to collect my thoughts. In my office, I retrieved my weapon from the safe, removing the safety as a precaution. Though not inclined toward violence, I couldn't shake the urge to assert myself if things escalated. Venturing into the living room, I confiscated the car keys and wallets from the discarded pants strewn across the floor, deflating the tires of all vehicles parked outside, including Sue's car. Returning indoors, a sinister grin crossed my face as I concocted a plan, confident it would succeed if Sue took her cell phone. Spotting it on the bedside table during my recording, I readied my camera, positioned myself discreetly behind the stairs, and dialed her number. After several unanswered attempts, she finally picked up, the silence in the house indicating she had warned the others to remain quiet. Sue, breathless, inquired, "Hey, Bobby, how's Albany?" The faint chuckles of the men in the room were audible. "You seem winded, are you okay?" I pretended concern in my voice. "Yes, had to hurry upstairs for my phone call," she replied swiftly, composing herself. "My client canceled, so I'll be home shortly. Interested in dinner?" I asked calmly, though internally I felt more agitated than ever. "Heading home now?" she asked anxiously. "Sounds good. Just need to get ready, babe." "See you," she hurriedly replied before ending the call abruptly, leaving me with a knowing smile, aware of what was about to unfold in just a minute. As anticipated, 4 completely undressed individuals began descending the stairs into the living room. The men swiftly dressed, and Sue also hurriedly tidied herself. As they all rushed out, Sue slipped on shoes and a jacket, glancing outside, hoping they'd depart before she did. Had she been less excited, she might have noticed my car parked on the street. The men all started shouting at her simultaneously, prompting Sue to step onto the porch to listen. At that precise moment, I slammed the front door shut and locked it behind her. My wife caught a glimpse of my face as I closed the door, attempting to communicate through the side window with a pleading tone in her voice. The time for discussion was over. The other men returned to my porch, banging on the front door, indicating they wanted their belongings. Realizing their intentions, I dialed emergency, reporting an attempted break-in. The dispatcher informed me a neighbor had already called. Providing my name and address, I awaited police assistance, which arrived promptly just 2 minutes later. After the police interrogated my wife, I approached the 2 officers at the scene and informed them that my wife had been maltreated by the men present, demanding their arrest. This caused immediate reactions from the men, who began shouting that they were invited, and she consented, denying any maltreatment allegations. Everyone, including myself, turned to Sue, waiting for her response. She avoided eye contact and admitted in a subdued voice filled with shame that she had invited the men into the house, engaged in closeness activity with them, and wasn't maltreated. She acted of her own volition. The men seemed relieved to avoid maltreatment charges. Shortly after, 2 more police cars arrived, and they recorded everyone's names for their report. The senior officer then addressed me, suggesting that since my wife invited these men and they were all over 18 years old, there was little legal recourse. He recommended counseling or similar assistance, delivering the remark with disdainful glare towards my wife. I instructed the police to call a taxi and informed them that Mrs. Thomas would not be allowed back into the house. That evening, one of the men called a taxi after discovering their flat tires. They also attempted to accuse me of stealing their belongings, but I refuted their claims to the police. Turning, I walked back to the porch, where Sue remained with them until the taxi arrived. I stood on the porch, my eyes flashing with anger. Despite my fury, my wife bravely approached me. Unaware of my rage and the firearm on my person, she may have fled had she known. "Bobby, I'm deeply sorry," she attempted to speak, but I swiftly interrupted. "You've shattered my heart, and I'll never forgive you. Jeff called you a strumpet, and honestly, I think it's fitting. Henceforth, I'll refer to you as such and won't use your real name again. If you ever need to communicate with me, do so through Tad." With those final words, I retreated into the house, locking the door behind me, leaving her standing there. She hurried back to the group in tears, and Jeff moved to console her. She rebuffed his embrace, which oddly brought me some solace. However, my fleeting satisfaction soon waned. Upon returning to my bedroom, the scent of lovemaking pervaded the air, further incensing me. I erupted in fury, ransacking the entire room. Hauling the mattress, I hurled it onto the front lawn. Retrieving my toolbox from the garage, I disassembled the bed, tossing its pieces outside along with the mattress. Returning to the bedroom, I seized Sue's cell phone from the floor, scrolling through her contacts and messages. Predictably, I discovered repugnant emails, photos, and even videos of unfamiliar men engaging in carnal acts with her. Examining the images, it was evident she was acquainted with them. I chuckled bitterly at my former attentiveness to her, realizing those days were long gone. I carted all the boxes from our bedroom downstairs, depositing their contents in separate piles on the front lawn. Proceeding to purge her belongings from the guest room, I encountered an unexpected revelation. Moving each dresser drawer outside as I had done with the bedroom items, I encountered resistance with the last bottom drawer. Fueled by anger, I forcefully yanked it, hearing a telltale crack. With a bit of force, the drawer finally opened, revealing the source of the obstruction. 7 or 8 DVDs hidden beneath. I accidentally cracked one of the plastic cases, but fortunately, the drive remained intact. My heart sank once more as I examined the discs. I didn't think I could feel any worse, yet I did. Descending the stairs, I scrutinized the titles on the discs, which only intensified my distress. Arriving in the living room, I arranged everything on shelves for closer inspection. The first disc depicted Sue with her close friend Sarah at Sarah's residence. Sue often assisted at Sarah's gatherings in Avon, typically held on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It seemed they engaged in closeness activities with various individuals at her house. As I watched the footage over several hours, tears welled up, halting only at the sight of the final 2 discs. The first showcased Sue with her tennis instructor, a service I funded. She attended lessons every Saturday, returning too fatigued for closeness later in the evening, which now became clear. The second disc revealed Sue engaging in closeness encounters at her workplace, specifically in the boardroom with Jeff, her boss, and Jeff's superior, Bill Evans. Bill held considerable influence in the community, often featured in newspaper articles for his philanthropic efforts, which, I now witnessed, extended to my wife's private affairs. Retrieving a large envelope, I carefully placed inside it a cell phone, the discs, and a cassette tape I had recorded earlier. My intention was to hand the entire envelope over to my lawyer and confidant, Ted Worth, my trusted friend of many years. He was one of only 2 individuals in whom I truly confided. Nothing else mattered at that moment. Glancing at Sue's computer on the desk, I powered it up and began duplicating every file, email, photo, and video onto external drives. It took approximately an hour to complete the process, after which I settled down to sift through my wife's digital archives. Among the videos were scenes reminiscent of those found on the CDs I had discovered. Additionally, I stumbled upon explicit images typically associated with adult websites. Delving further, I uncovered a trove of emails spanning about 6 months. Despite her attempts to conceal them under misleading file names, I unearthed correspondence between her, Jeff, and several other men, as well as exchanges with Sarah. Just last week, I had dismissed them until one nearly devastated me. The thought of using my weapon crossed my mind, but I realized she wasn't worth it. I had to remain strong. The only email that affected me this deeply was from Sue to Sarah. Sarah questioned why she hadn't left me to be single again and asked Sue to detail her ideal future husband. Here's how she responded. "Sarah, I have no interest in him anymore. Bobby is faithful but foolish. I fear he'll soon uncover my secret lifestyle. He's not entirely clueless, but love blinds him. Lately, he's been gaining weight, and his expanding belly is off-putting. Comparing him to other men, he's lacking. I also detest beards and mustaches, which make him appear somewhat repulsive. I once loved him deeply, but the excitement of recent years is too enticing to give up. His lawyer best friend could pose problems if he gets involved. Jeff and Bill at work hint at promotions and perks with suggestive undertones. I laugh. I also desire a house and a car. If I play my cards right, I could also secure alimony each month. Additionally, I'm anticipating our Tuesday party, pending recovery from my tennis injury. Tony is impressive. Ensure I received last Thursday's video. It was my first time with so many men simultaneously. As for my dream man, he must be affluent, loyal, compliant, and not too bright. He must cater to my every whim and still ask which one. I chuckle. I'm indifferent about the bedroom as long as there's money involved. I laugh. I can fulfill my needs elsewhere. Sometimes it feels too easy. Damn, Bobby's home now. Gotta go. See you on Tuesday. Call me Sue. I read this letter repeatedly, its words disgusting, and the last few years deeply hurting me. Did she truly feel this way about me? Was my love so blind that she cheated on me for over 2 years? Afterward, I retired to bed and fell asleep on the sofa. The next morning, plagued by restless sleep, I called in sick to work. I reached out to my close friend and lawyer, Ted Worth. Mary, Ted's secretary, answered the phone. I'd known her almost as long as Ted. I urgently requested a meeting, but she informed me he'd be tied up in court all day. Mary informed Ted that I need to meet him in his office in an hour. If he starts bothering you with nonsense, bring up Tammy Brown's name. That'll grab his attention. See you in an hour, I said before ending the call promptly. I began getting dressed when my phone rang. Reluctant to speak with Sue, I checked the caller ID. It was an unknown number, so I answered, suspecting it might be Ted returning my call. Hello, Mr. Thomas. This is Bill Evans from Susan's office. If possible, I'd like to discuss the events from last evening at your house. Could we meet today in my office to clarify the situation for all involved? Unsure if he was aware of the video footage of him with my wife at his workplace, I knew he was concerned about retaining Jeff Davis's key clients. My wife and Jeff were valuable assets to him, and he likely didn't want to lose them. Additionally, he was surely worried about negative publicity for his company and himself personally. Mr. Evans, I have an important meeting this morning, but I'll call you back on this number before noon to arrange something for today, I assured him calmly. I conveyed it as though he was reasoning with me. He was in for a surprise. As I stepped out, I glimpsed what resembled a bizarre yard sale. The broken bed and Sue's clothes were still strewn about. An elderly neighbor waved, wearing a curious expression. I knew I'd become the talk of the neighborhood. As they say in the news, it was a suburb sensation. In the city center, I grabbed a bite to eat before heading straight to Ted's office. Mary brewed a cup of coffee for me. Lots of cream, no sugar. We had a long history together. Holy crap, Bobby. I don't know what you've got on Tad, but I mentioned his name and he instructed me to clear his schedule for today. I could use a month off, she quipped. If you want to know who Tammy Brown is, she added jokingly, you'll have to ask Ted. By the way, where is he? I inquired. He said he'd be here right away. He needed to reschedule his meeting with the judge for today's court hearing, she informed me. Just then he walked in. Holy crap, Bobby. Tammy Brown. You must be in big trouble for mentioning that name to me. Come into the office and let's talk. Mary, don't patch me through to anyone right now, Tad quickly interjected. I grabbed my coffee and he shut the door for privacy. I recounted the events of the previous evening and shared what I had discovered about Sue's new lifestyle. Then, I handed him an envelope with the evidence I had gathered, and finally, he spoke. He listened attentively to my story without interruption. I could see the legal gears turning in his head as he processed the events from the night before. I also informed him about Bill Evans's request for a meeting today. Well, Bobby, as they say, let's prioritize. I've known you for a long time, and I understand you're devastated. Is there any chance for reconciliation with Sue? He inquired. Ted, if it were Katie, your wife, and you found those videos and emails, you'd leave her in an instant. I want a divorce, but I also want to inflict some serious damage. I'm not going to quietly accept this betrayal, I confessed. Okay, first, we'll sue Tony and the tennis club. Sarah is off the table as she's just a friend. Sue's workplace, however, is a different story. Secondly, we'll sue the 2 clients and their companies who were at your house. We'll also go after Jeff Davis, Bill Evans, and their associates. He warned that things might get worse before they get better, Ted cautioned me. But I don't care. Even if I have to resort to physical confrontation, I'm going to make these people pay for what they've done through Sue, I asserted with anger in my voice. All right, Bobby. Recap what Bill Evans wanted, and we'll proceed from there. Ted informed me that we explored several options, and I favored the final one. A direct attack on Sue's workplace seemed most fitting. I had leverage with video evidence of Davis, Evans, and Sue in their boardroom, Ted explained, noting that as Sue's superiors, they influenced her position. It could also result in serious legal repercussions. I liked the sound of it. Ted also hinted that once Bill Evans realized what evidence we had, his stance would change, likely resulting in a settlement offer. If it's less than $2 million, he can forget it, I remarked firmly. I'll tell you what, Ted, make it $2.5 million. I've seen your legal bills before, I joked. Come over tonight at 7 p.m. Katie will whip up a fantastic dinner for us. You could use a break from home, I insisted. I promptly scheduled an appointment with Bill Evans for 2 p.m. Following this, Mary peeked into the office. Ted, they're calling you online. 1, she informed him. Mary, I told you no calls, he snapped, visibly agitated. Sorry, Ted, but this is Susan. She wants to talk to you, and I thought you might want to answer, Mary persisted. Sorry, Mary, it's going to be a long day, and it's just getting started. Does she know Bobby is here? He inquired. Not that I know, Ted, she replied. Tell her I'll talk to her in a minute, he said more calmly as Mary promptly exited to the reception area. Well, I bet she's already discovered that her cell phone, computer, and all her DVDs are missing. I bet she was furious that I dumped all her belongings on the front lawn along with our bed, I informed him. Wow, you really had a busy evening. Let me handle this conversation, and please refrain from intervening. As your lawyer, I need to clarify a few things right now, he indicated to me, connecting the call. I started to overhear a one-sided conversation, but I could almost discern what she was saying to Tad without hearing her words. Hi, Susan, this is Ted. Yes, I already spoke to him. Bobby is a stand-up guy and my friend. I thought you, of all people, would have his back instead of betraying him. No excuses, Sue. I'm not in the mood. Yes, I'll represent him. He has strong arguments. You know this won't be pleasant, right? I'll talk to him. But you've shattered a man who was always faithful and deeply loved you. I doubt he cares about your opinion. My advice is to get yourself a good lawyer. You'll need one. Yes, Bill Evans scheduled an appointment for 2 p.m., though I don't think you should attend. Listen to me, Sue. If you even attempt to eavesdrop outside the office door, I'll advise Bobby to leave, and things will escalate. It's better to wait and keep yourself composed today. I know he put your belongings out on the lawn, but just as you can invite strangers into your bedroom, he can remove your possessions from the house. Frankly, I'm surprised he didn't resort to violence last night. Yes, he was armed, but for self-defense purposes. Remember, he believed you were in danger of assault. It's in the police report. I can't say for certain, but if it were my Katie, I'd likely be in custody right now. I think he acted out of anger given the circumstances. Regarding your computer, cell phone, and any other missing items, you'll need to speak to the co-owner of the house. Perhaps he left them on the lawn along with your clothes, and someone took them. I've handled all the escrow paperwork for the house, and you both have equal rights. How you exercise these rights is up to each of you. Ted responded that he would inform him immediately, and advised Sue sternly to remain where she was and let Bobby stay in the house until things were resolved, as it wasn't safe for her to be there with him at the moment. He then told Sue not to push it, and expressed his temptation to punch her in the nose. He instructed her to stay with Sarah and promised to be in touch, asking her lawyer to contact him once they've retained one. Tears wouldn't sway Ted now, as he was not only Bobby's legal counsel, but also his friend. He stated that her tears wouldn't move him, and that he could be ruthless when necessary, which seemed to be one of those times. He expressed regret that she would witness a side of him only his enemies see, and warned her that she wouldn't like it. Ted concluded by instructing Sue to keep her distance from Bobby and remain in her office for the time being, as he wanted nothing to do with her. Glancing up at me, Ted asked if I caught most of that conversation, his tone tinged with sadness. I confessed to my friend that I did catch most of it, expressing my wish to confront her face to face and express my true feelings. However, I admitted that I didn't think I could bear the pain of seeing her again, at least not yet. I have a couple of requests for you, Bobby, he said, his demeanor shifting instantly to one of positivity and optimism. First, hand me those tapes. Tad indicated for me to retrieve the videotapes from the envelope, those from the previous night, the ones featuring Tony at the tennis club, and the footage of Sue with Mr. Davis and Mr. Evans in her office. After handing him the tapes, he instructed me to invite Mary to join me for lunch. I gave him a puzzled look, to which he promptly responded in kind. I think it's best if I review them myself to spare you any further distress before our meeting at 2 p.m. Moreover, I don't believe watching this material would benefit you right now. I don't want you to be upset before our meeting with Bill Evans." I acknowledged his wisdom and thanked him before sharing the good news with Mary. She jokingly suggested I take her to an upscale restaurant if Ted was footing the bill. We both chuckled and left the premises. Mary proved to be an excellent dining companion, and for the next hour, she helped me forget my troubles. Upon our return, we heard Ted cheering as we entered the office. He was in high spirits, doing a little victory dance at his desk. "These recordings are a game changer, Bobby. I can't believe it," he exclaimed. My expression turned bittersweet, and I think he finally grasped why. "Oh, Bobby, I'm truly sorry I didn't acknowledge the significance of these videos. I know Sue's actions have deeply hurt you. I was just excited about what I uncovered." He apologized sincerely. "Bobby, come over here. I need your eyes on something." Ted beckoned me, and I complied, positioning myself behind him to view his screen. "Did you watch the entire video Tony shot at the tennis club with Sue?" he inquired. "No, I only managed to skim through some of it last night. It was tough to stomach without feeling the urge to lash out or worse," I admitted honestly. "Well, brace yourself. Towards the end, just after Tony and Sue finish, they attract a small crowd in the men's locker room. Yes, the tennis club's locker room. I hate to say it, but she let the other men who were watching join in after Tony. I'm not telling you this to upset you, but to shed light on this guy right here," Ted explained, pointing at the screen on his desk. The individual he was indicating was an older man DML treatmented in a towel. With his long gray hair and a walrus-like mustache, he asked if I recognized him. Ted hit play on the video, and I saw him discard the towel, revealing a substantial package any man would boast about. The issue was, he went straight to my wife and engaged in coition with her. The next moment, she was surrounded by 5 more men eagerly awaiting their turn, I recounted. "Ted, I have no clue who this guy is, but I presume you do," I responded, trying to maintain composure. "Bobby, this is ammunition for our meeting today at the tennis club at 16 Nasi, he informed me, his excitement palpable as he explained his strategy. I grinned when I heard his plan. Besides being my friend, Ted was an exceptional lawyer. I was relieved to have him on my side this time. We departed his office for downtown, armed with a portable DVD player, some printed photographs, and legal envelopes. Upon arrival at Sue's building, we proceeded to Bill Evans's office on the top floor, with Sue's office located 1 floor below. After waiting in the reception area, we were eventually ushered into Mr. Evans's lavishly furnished office. Just before entering, I sensed someone observing me from the hallway. I glanced in that direction and caught a glimpse of the woman before she vanished around the corner. Guess who? I thought to myself, relieved I wouldn't have to confront her today. We stepped into Bill's office, adorned with opulent furniture and adorned with plaques, awards, and photos of him with various notable figures. The thought crossed my mind. Had he ever brought Sue here? At that moment, my disdain for Mr. Evans intensified more than ever. I introduced Ted and took the lead in the conversation. "Hello, Mr. Evans. This is my friend Ted Worth, and he'll be joining us for the meeting you scheduled today," I informed Bill as we exchanged handshakes. "Mr. Thomas, Bob, I thought this was meant to be a private meeting between you and me," Mr. Evans inquired. "Well, I decided to bring Ted along. Anything you have to say to me, you can say to him as well," I stated firmly, without opening it up for discussion. He accepted Ted's presence and directed his remarks solely at me, disregarding Ted. This brought a smile to Ted's face. I anticipated what was coming next, but allowed Mr. Evans to speak first before we burst his bubble. "Bob, may I call you Bob?" Bill asked. Absolutely no issues. In fact, I thought it might be beneficial to have Jeff Davis present at this meeting too. "I'm not sure if it's feasible, but it concerns him as well," I informed Mr. Evans. After a brief pause, he pressed the intercom button. "Julie, inform Jeff that I require his presence in my office immediately. Tell him to drop everything and come here right away." "Understood. Jeff will be here shortly. In the meantime, I want to express my sincere apologies for the trouble caused by Jeff and Sue in your life. I know last night must have been awful, but if we collaborate, we might be able to find a solution beneficial to all parties," Bill expressed optimistically. "What exactly do you mean, Mr. Evans?" I inquired, waiting for Jeff's arrival. "I genuinely care for your wife, Sue," Bill began, but was interrupted by Jeff's entrance. He hesitated momentarily, appearing as though he might turn and leave, but Bill instructed him to take a seat. Reluctantly, Jeff complied, avoiding eye contact with me. "Bob, I wanted to convey that I have great affection for Sue. Almost like a daughter," he started to speak when Ted interjected. "Are you implying you have a penchant for incest, Mr. Evans?" Ted asked, catching him off guard. I chuckled to myself. understanding the intent behind Ted's remark. What? What are you suggesting? Do I have a fondness for incest? What on earth does that mean? He retorted with indignation. Well, allow me to illustrate. As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, Ted stated, placing the DVD player on Bill's desk. These are screenshots from the video you're about to watch. He handed them to Jeff, not Bill. Jeff's eyes widened, and he passed them slowly to Bill. The images depicted Bill and Jeff both involved with my wife, leaving no room for doubt about their identities or actions. I even suspected Bill recognized his own boardroom table where he and Sue had engaged in their activities. Jeff, are you seriously telling me that you were foolish enough to record this on video and distribute copies? Bill queried, nearly speechless. It was evident that Jeff was currently unable to provide a response and appeared completely dumbfounded. Well, Mr. Evans, here's how it's going to unfold. Oh, and just to clarify, I'm Bobby's attorney as well as his friend. So let me outline what we expect and how we expect you to address it, Tad informed the shocked audience, thoroughly relishing the moment. Firstly, Sue retains her position without question. Bobby believes she'll require employment, and she seems to fit in quite well with everyone here. He directed this statement to Bill, accompanied by a subtle wink. Secondly, Mr. Davis is no longer part of the equation here. Sue stays, and he exits, Tad declared to Bill, gesturing towards the flabbergasted Jeff. Thirdly, we expect you to present us with a monetary offer that respects our intelligence. We'll entertain your initial proposal and provide a yes or no response within 5 business days. We anticipate taking legal action within 2 months, possibly sooner if necessary. Before they could interject, Tad initiated the video playback, swiveling the screen for Bill's viewing. It depicted both men engaging in carnal acts with my wife repetitively in their boardroom. Jeff didn't need to watch, given his involvement in the video recording. Bill simply observed with his mouth agape. I could sense his mind working overtime, contemplating how to salvage his business, reputation, family life, and, most importantly, finances. I knew action would be imminent. Jeff, after these gentlemen depart today, we'll need to have a serious discussion about your future employment here. I'll consult with my legal counsel to negotiate a settlement that satisfies you to some extent. You both comprehend the potential repercussions for our business if this information were to surface prematurely, Bill mused aloud. Don't fret, Mr. Evans. We'll maintain your confidentiality until we receive a serious proposal from you. However, I wouldn't rush to terminate Mr. Davis's employment just yet. He may possess additional copies of the video, providing him with leverage. If we fail to act, you and Mr. Davis can address this matter independently. Oh, and just so you're aware, both of you could face legal consequences for engaging in relations with an employee, directly impacting your employment status and prospects, Tad cautioned them. As we both rose to depart, Tad reclaimed the DVD player and the photographs we had brought along. We exited just as Bill and Jeff seemed poised for a private discussion. I approached Tad with a query, but he gestured for silence until we were outside. I hadn't noticed my wife lurking around the corner, attempting to eavesdrop on our conversation, but Tad had. The last thing I heard was Mr. Evans barking into Julie's intercom. Get Sue Thomas here immediately. I grinned, anticipating an intriguing encounter. Bill would soon discover that I had discovered his DVD in our home. Once outside, I inquired why he had given Jeff an escape route by suggesting he use his own videotape against Bill. Divide and conquer, as they say, Ted explained. It's better if they don't act as a united front, but rather each for themselves. That way, if Bill makes a half-hearted offer to us, we can play them against each other. Tad also noted wisely that Jeff and Bill have families and attend church, despite their behavior depicted in the videotapes. They're not keen on rocking the familial boat at present. As I departed the building, I realized it would now be remembered as the site where my wife betrayed me, rather than the esteemed workplace she once inhabited. It saddened me to think about. Ted's words snapped me back to reality. All right, let's grab a beer before our next rendezvous at the tennis club at 4 p.m. We could both use a drink right now, and there's something I need to discuss with you, though I'm not quite sure how yet, Ted mentioned as we drove across town toward the tennis club. We stopped at a quaint bar restaurant adjacent to the tennis club. Ted ordered 2 beers and began speaking to me. Bobby, I believe Bill Evans will extend an offer, but likely for just under $1 million. I'm familiar with his legal team from another case, and they're quite adept. He's also a realist. I'll call him tomorrow and convey that a lowball offer won't bode well for his client's business or personal life. I'll propose around $3 million or suggest we abandon negotiations altogether, he disclosed. Furthermore, I need to ascertain if, in the event the offer is rejected, I have your authorization to cast Susan in an unfavorable light. I won't hold back for anything. My duty as your legal representative is to pursue what ensures victory in court, even if it entails painting an unflattering portrait of her. It might get ugly and highly publicized. I'll utilize every legal means at my disposal to secure our case. You might not appreciate all the potentially damning revelations about Sue, your marriage, and even your carnal life that could surface. I'm not sure if you've considered this aspect, Ted added at the 11th hour. I expressed that I had given serious consideration to the matter and believed I possessed more integrity than they gave me credit for. I mentioned that if necessary, I was willing to proceed, but I preferred to explore the financial offer route first, which I hinted at to Ted. Ted agreed and suggested starting by evaluating what Bill had to offer. He assured me that if Bill's offer was unsatisfactory, he would handle all the necessary paperwork promptly. Additionally, he mentioned leveraging his newspaper contacts and friends at 3 local news stations. He said they would be willing to obtain footage or images, even if they needed to censor the explicit content with blue bars, as they say in sitcoms. Ted, you've consistently been there for me, and I trust your judgment. I just wish this whole mess never happened. Being an oblivious husband was more enjoyable than being publicly humiliated by a cheating wife. Nevertheless, you have my authorization to take whatever actions are necessary. After all, I didn't initiate this debacle, but I'm determined to conclude it soon, I expressed with frustration in my voice. Understood, Bobby. No problem. Now, let's discuss the material for our next meeting. This guy, Mr. Harry Rydell, is the owner of the Ace Tennis Club. This is the guy I pointed out in the video in my office. He's indicated that he'll likely adopt a laissez-faire attitude, asserting that adults will be adults and he won't intervene. Even Tony's tennis coach might be dismissed for appearance's sake, only to be rehired later. Tony's quite popular at the club, particularly among female members. Keep in mind, Bobby, that while men primarily pay club dues, women are also stakeholders. This dynamic will be pivotal in your interaction with Mr. Rydell. He briefed me on the situation. We arrived just in time, and it was evident that Mr. Rydell and Thad didn't see eye to eye. Their animosity was palpable from the outset, Mr. Rydell told Thad bluntly, signaling the meeting's conclusion. Mr. Rydell, this is Bob Thomas, he said, nodding in my direction, and his wife is a member of your club. It has come to our attention that Tony Simba, your tennis instructor, was having an affair with Mr. Thomas's wife. We want to know what you plan to do about this, Tad finished. He waited for Rydell to speak, but even I knew that he would take everything upon himself, and in a few words, send Thad to hell. Listen, what 2 consenting adults do behind closed doors in their own time is none of my business, Harry Rydell informed us. And as for you, Mr. Thomas, if you can't satisfy your wife in the bedroom, don't come crying to me and blaming me if she strays. There are plenty of unhappy spouses who frequent the Ace Tennis Club. Some keep returning for the personalized attention my staff provides them, if you catch my drift, Harry said, winking at me. I felt the urge to lash out at him, but Ted restrained my wrist and quietly advised me to stay composed and follow his lead. You see, Harry, you're assuming this occurred outside the club without the owner's knowledge and consent. It's presumptuous of you to make such assumptions, Ted confronted him, pulling out a DVD player and placing it on his desk. Ted pressed play, directing the screen towards Harry. It was evident from his reaction that he didn't like what he saw in the video footage. Before Harry could respond, Thad interjected, Harry, you, with full awareness and with your colleague's complicity, took advantage of a paying member of your club. Mrs. Susan Thomas, a married woman whose dues were paid by Mr. Thomas, is now a dissatisfied customer, Thad informed the silent Mr. Rydell. When this information surfaces, every dues-paying man will want to know if his wife is engaging in similar activities while he foots the bill. I'll have to subpoena everyone present in the locker room that day. Married men may not be pleased with you about this, Ted added, adopting an almost storytelling tone. Furthermore, there's the issue of reasonable expectation of privacy when filming in the locker room. Harry, once I'm through with you, your club won't retain its community reputation, and your bank account may suffer as well, Ted asserted for added persuasion. So here's what we're after. A substantial offer from you and prompt action. Doing so could spare you considerable inconvenience and financial loss, Ted concluded, as we observed Harry Rydell weighing his options. Ted, you're still a real piece of work, but I can't argue with your reasoning. I'll contact you tomorrow with my offer. If I comply, all tapes will be returned to me and remain confidential. I'll also willingly terminate Tony's employment. Now, if that's all you legal extortionists came for, get the hell out. Harry Rydell dismissed us, as Ted retrieved the DVD player with a grin and powered it off. "Oh, and say hi to Tito Martinez," Ted remarked to Harry before exiting the room. "Go to hell, Worth," was all Harry could retort. Ted chuckled all the way back to the parking lot. "That was quite the adventure. Now we wait for suggestions," Tad informed me as we headed to his house for a delightful homemade dinner. By week's end, Bill Evans had offered nearly $2.7 million to retain Sue as his employee. Jeff Davis, after naively handing over all his tapes to Bill Evans, found himself out of a job. Bill simply terminated him, leaving poor Jeff with little recourse. I went after the two fools who were with my wife the night I caught her with Jeff. They happened to be two of Jeff's major clients. Neither of them wanted any publicity, whether for their companies or themselves. So each of them offered me $1 million to keep quiet. Harry Rydell refused to make any offer and suggested we take legal action. So we did, and he ended up losing $3 million by the time we were done with him. His club suffered a mass exodus of members, and he was compelled to relinquish ownership. He likely thought he could evade consequences. But the judge wasn't impressed with the footage from the private locker rooms, nor with the infidelity. I granted Sue a house and a car as she desired, without having to pay a cent in child support. I only encountered her twice in court. Both times I greeted her as a strumpet, which brought her to tears. I often pondered why she cried now, but not before causing such turmoil in my life. I came into more money than I ever imagined thanks to following Ted's advice. The pain still lingered, haunting me to this day. All the trials of that dreadful year rushed back in an instant. I hadn't realized anyone was addressing me until I snapped out of my flashback and heard the restaurant manager inquiring if everything was all right. Unsure how long I had stood there lost in thought, I shook my head to clear it and returned to the present. "Apologies, just reminiscing about an old issue once I saw the group I came to meet." "Thanks again," I explained to the manager, noticing the curious glance he gave, reminiscent of how people regard an elderly person lost in reverie. I made a beeline for my ex-wife's table. The surprise was evident on her face. When last we were together, I was overweight, with long hair and a beard, nursing an old knee injury from baseball. That was my excuse then, but truthfully, I had settled into a complacent life with her. Now I sported a shorter haircut, was trim from regular workouts, and had my knee repaired thanks to the money from Jeff and Bill's company. My suits were now upscale, and I made an effort to present well in public. I opted to speak up first. "You look fantastic today, Strumpet. Almost forgot how stunning you could be," I remarked, intentionally provoking a reaction. I knew exactly how to push her buttons. "My name is Susan, Bobby. Why can't you address me by my name?" she retorted, clearly irritated. "I didn't label you Strumpet. You know who did? I simply find it fitting. I warned you 3 years ago that you shattered my heart, and I'll always remember you by that title," I explained, as the man beside her began to object and rise from his seat. But Sue urged him to remain calm. Tears welled up, smudging her makeup. Her boyfriend interjected, "Go freshen up, Sue, and fix your face. I'll handle this idiot for you." With those words, she stood, locking eyes with me as I reciprocated with a single glance, perhaps revealing the agony I'd harbored for 3 years. Her tears flowed harder, surprising me that she still harbored any sentiment toward me. Or perhaps it was lingering guilt, likely a blend of both. "I expect you to be gone when I return," she declared tearfully, heading to the restroom, where I noticed the sizable engagement ring on her finger as she wiped her eyes and left. "You must be Bob Thomas, Sue's ex-husband?" he queried with disdain in his tone. "Indeed, and you must be the new man she's been dreaming of," I retorted, sensing his indignation. "I'm Sue's CFO, and if I were you, I'd refrain from using that term," he cautioned, though his reluctance to cause a scene was evident. "I only sought to converse with you privately. I have 3 inquiries, then I'll vanish from your life forever," I informed him, noting his quizzical expression. "I've been in your shoes before, and I don't want anyone else to endure my fate. I suppose the strumpet painted me as a lousy husband, abusive or neglectful, or a womanizer," I remarked, knowing precisely what she'd conveyed to him. "But I'm not here to salvage my reputation in your eyes. Honestly, I doubt it'd serve any purpose. First off, does Sarah still host her Avon gatherings at her place on Tuesdays and Thursdays?" I inquired. "Sue assists Sarah with her decor sales on Mondays and Wednesdays. It seems your memory's a bit faulty," he snapped back. "All right then. Does she still take tennis lessons on Saturdays?" I pressed. "Sue swings a racket on Sundays. You seem to have a hazy recollection for someone married to her for so long," he remarked triumphantly. "All right, final question. Have you ever checked under the bottom drawer of the dresser in your living room? I asked hurriedly. No, why would I even do that? He protested. The 3 questions I posed to you are the reasons why we're no longer together. I still have all the leftover divorce paperwork in my office. Legal documents, emails from Sarah and the other woman, and hours of videotapes. I've carried these with me for the past 3 years, so I thought you should have them, I explained, retrieving a worn and folded piece of paper from my wallet. This is what the other woman wrote to Sarah when she inquired about how to get rid of me before I discovered her infidelity. After reading that letter, I realized I didn't know her at all and probably still don't. But it all revolves around you, I stated, handing him the paper. However, I knew Sue very well and understood her compulsive habits. She always followed the same routine meticulously, sometimes driving me crazy. I also had a feeling that even with a new man, she'd stick to her old ways, I elaborated. He seemed hesitant to accept the paper, but curiosity seemed to win out. He reached over and opened the email. I've carried it for 3 years, occasionally rereading it and striving to better myself so that no woman would ever write such things about me again. Of all the evidence, that email hit me the hardest, which is why I've kept it with me. It's the same email I mentioned earlier in my story. Peter read the letter slowly and set it down on the table. Quickly, he grabbed a pen, scribbled a note on it, and to my surprise, abruptly left the restaurant. No glance back, no thanks, nothing. His expression remained impassive. I leaned over to see what he had written on the old email. I'll return home shortly. Please wait here and I'll call you in 15 minutes. I need to check under the bottom drawer of my living room dresser. Be right back, Peter. I sensed he'd seen the truth, even if he wasn't thrilled about it. Something told me I hit too close to home on all 3 matters. The email seemed to be the tipping point, and he needed to verify it himself. Leaving a note on Sue's table, I departed. There was no way I'd stay in that restaurant with anyone tonight. Back in the foyer, I phoned my client, who didn't mind rescheduling the meeting since they were running late anyway. Before leaving, I glanced once more at the table. Sue returned, searching for Peter. Sitting down, she noticed her old email and Peter's note below. Her face drained of color as she recognized the contents of her old email and Peter's message. The last time I saw my wife, she was sobbing so intensely that the entire restaurant turned to look. I felt a pang of pity, but at the same time I was indifferent. That was the final encounter with her. I still wonder if Peter found something under the dresser drawer. Sue's tears indicated he might have. It was barely 8:45 a.m., but this Monday was already shaping up to be the worst one I'd ever had. I'd kissed my wife Marissa goodbye earlier that morning. She's been my partner for 15 years and is an incredibly successful real estate agent, judging by her impressive stack of commissions and bonuses. "And you have a good day?" She chimed in that overly polished realtor voice she knew I couldn't stand. Her smirk suggested she was holding back a secret, which only added to my irritation. On my way to the office, I couldn't stop thinking about the heap of reports due by the end of the month. I got in at my usual time, 7:45, dropped off my briefcase, and headed to the men's room for a quick coffee break. That's when everything went sideways. While at the office, I was suddenly overwhelmed by a sharp pain at the WC, prompting a loud scream. My boss, Alan Randall, quickly came to assist, expressing deep concern. I described the severe, burning sensation, and we both noticed the alarming greenish discharge. Alan immediately advised me to seek medical attention and reassured me not to worry about the pending reports, promising to handle them and suggesting I take the necessary time off. Grateful, I thanked him for his understanding and support, appreciating his compassionate approach during such a distressing moment. I splashed water on my face, grabbed my briefcase, and headed out the door. I told the receptionist I wouldn't be back for at least a day, maybe longer. Normally, I'd see my regular doctor, but his office was clear across town, and I doubted I'd get an appointment today. Instead, I opted for the urgent care just a few blocks from my office. Once there, they quickly took some samples and directed me to the waiting room. It felt like hours, but only 30 minutes passed before a nurse called out sharply, "Greg Watson." She gestured for me to come over with a look that made me feel less than human. Curious about her demeanor, I followed her to the observation room. "Have a seat, Mr. Watson," she instructed coldly. I sat down and watched as she took my vitals, blood pressure, temperature, the works, without much conversation. After jotting down the details, she mentioned, "The doctor will see you shortly," and left the room. Not long after, there was a knock on the door. An older man in a white coat entered, holding a folder. "Mr. Watson, I'm Dr. Smith," he introduced himself. Sitting down, he opened the folder and didn't mince words. "Your tests show you have gonorrhea." "Gonorrhea?" I repeated, stunned. "Yes, it's a physically transmitted disease," Dr. Smith said, giving me a look that suggested I should have known better. "I'll prescribe an antibiotic, and you should avoid any sexual activity for at least 7 days after you finish your treatment. If you still have symptoms after that, see your primary doctor." The news hit me like a truck, but Dr. Smith's straightforward manner helped cut through the shock. I nodded, processing the steps I needed to take next. He started by saying that other tests were ongoing, and it could take a couple of weeks or more to get my results. He then asked for a list of people I'd recently been in contact with. "I've only been intimate with one person in my entire life," I told him. "My wife." He gave me a sad look for a moment before checking my chart. "If I got it from her, wouldn't she show symptoms?" I asked. "Not necessarily, Mr. Watson," he replied. "She might confuse them for something like a bladder or vaginal infection. It's important she gets checked soon. Waiting could lead to serious complications." "Excuse me, Mr. Watson." He handed me some medication and had me sign a few forms. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Watson, and make sure to follow up with your doctor," he advised as he left. Feeling a mix of emotions, I finished up and headed to my car. I called my boss to update him. "I'm sorry to hear that, Greg," Alan said. "Don't worry, your privacy is my priority. You'll take a leave and return when you're ready. I've taken care of your reports, so just focus on getting better." "Thank you," I replied, ending the call. Next, I had to talk to my parents, whom I never hid anything from. I hit their speed dial and my dad answered. "Hey, son, are you at work?" he asked. "No, Dad, I'm dealing with a health issue and need to talk with you and Mom," I said. "Of course," he replied. "Are the kids okay?" "They're fine," I assured him. "But I'd rather not discuss this over the phone." "Come over then. We'll have coffee and talk," he suggested. We hung up and I put away my phone, ready to face the next conversation. I should tell you a bit about my background. My sister Denise and I were raised in a very religious and loving family. Our childhood was filled with laughter and love, and although our parents were very much in love, they were also quite strict. One of the key rules in our house was no closeness before marriage. Because of this upbringing, I didn't have sex until I married Marissa. While we were dating, I told her I wanted to wait until marriage. She responded with a big smile and a deep kiss, saying, "That's so sweet. I promise I'll rock your world on our wedding night." And she certainly did. It was an incredible experience, and she was patient and loving as she showed me how to make love in a way that pleased her. Eventually, I began to really enjoy our intimacy, and it seemed she did too. Marissa had been with others before me, but that didn't bother me as long as she was committed to our relationship. Not long after we married, she took a job at a busy real estate office while working towards her license. Our first daughter, Lisa, was born about a year into our marriage, followed by Ginger a year later. Marissa decided to have her tubes tied after Ginger's tough delivery, feeling that 2 children were enough. While I had hoped for a son, I couldn't have been happier with my daughters. Both became the light of my life, quickly turning me into a doting father. When Marissa went back to work after her maternity leave, I often found myself playing the role of Mr. Mom, especially when she worked late or had paperwork to catch up on. As the girls grew, I took them to their various activities. Lisa with her music lessons and Ginger with her sports, particularly when Marissa's work took her away in the evenings. Over time, though, Marissa started to be away even more frequently, attending seminars and company retreats, sometimes over weekends or for an entire week. She always made sure to call us every night, but the increasing distance was hard. On top of everything, she developed an irritating, fake persona that really got under my skin. I brought it up more than once, but she seemed committed to it. Her attitude toward work had shifted too, and I started to wonder if she was spending too much time there. Even our daughters began to notice the changes in their mom. Despite these issues, the thought of her being unfaithful never crossed my mind. She knew my strong stance on infidelity. One day, I arrived at my parents' house and pulled into the driveway. My dad greeted me at the door with a warm hug and a pat on the shoulder. "We just finished the coffee. Come on in, and we'll make some more and talk," he invited. I walked into the dining room and gave my mom a hug before we sat down at the table. She poured us coffee and I added cream and butter pecan syrup to mine. Dad did the same, and we each took a sip. "Why don't we start with a prayer?" Dad suggested. "Of course," I agreed. It was their way, prayer first, Then conversation. After a few minutes of prayer, we got down to business. "What's wrong, son?" Dad asked. "I just came from the urgent care clinic. I have gonorrhea," I said. "Oh my God," Dad responded quietly, always composed as long as he heard the truth. "Were you fooling around?" he asked after a pause. "No, Dad, never," I assured him. "Marissa is the only woman I've ever been with." He nodded. "I believe you, son. I just needed to hear you say it." "What are you planning to do?" Mom chimed in. "I don't see any other option but to divorce her," I admitted. "It's going to be tough on the girls." "They're old enough to understand," I added. "I can't just overlook this. Even if she promises it won't happen again, I can't trust her." "Do you know how long this has been going on?" Dad asked. "I just found out this morning," I replied. "Adultery is a clear ground for divorce." "Hold on a second," Dad said, getting up to go to his office. Mom looked heartbroken. "I'm so sorry this is happening, Greg," she said. "I always thought Marissa was such a wonderful woman." "Me too, Mom. It seems she fooled us all." Dad returned with his Rolodex, flipping through until he found a particular card. "There she is," he said. "You know Gina Hawkins? The family law attorney from our church?" I asked. "Yes, that's her. Let me give her a call," he said. It wasn't surprising he had her card. As a deacon, Dad kept contacts from the congregation handy. He dialed and spoke to Gina's secretary before getting through to her. I listened as he explained the situation. "Gina, hi, it's Dan Watson. Yes, from the church. Listen, I'm calling because my son could really use your help soon. He's facing a tough situation, and I think you could assist." "Oh, really? This afternoon at 12:30? That's perfect. I'll make sure he gets there. Thanks so much, Gina. I owe you one. Take care and give your little one a big hug from us, okay? Bye." After hanging up, Dad turned to me. "That was Gina. She can see you today at 12:30, thanks to a canceled appointment. Make sure you bring your financials and tax returns from the last 2 years," he informed me. "Okay," I said, realizing I needed to get my documents ready. "I guess I'd better head inside and pack my things." "That sounds like a good plan," Dad replied. "And you know you have to talk to Marissa about the STD. She needs to get tested as well to prevent any further spread." "Maybe the girls should stay with us for a bit," Mom suggested. "Things might get tense at home with everything going on." "You're right," Dad agreed. "Have them stay a few days until things calm down." "Look, son, why don't you bring the girls over after school? We'll take care of getting them to school on time," he proposed. "I will." "Thanks, Dad," I said. We chatted a bit more before I got up to leave. Dad hugged me at the door. "It'll work out, son," he reassured me. "Just don't do anything rash. I know you're hurt and might want revenge on Marissa, but remember Romans 12:19. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Don't make me bail you out of jail. Think about your girls." I grinned. "No problem, Dad. I got it," I assured him. I got back in my car and headed home. Dad was right about one thing. I did want revenge on Marissa and whoever else was involved. After over 15 years of loving her exclusively, this felt like the ultimate betrayal. When I arrived home, I started going through my files to find my old tax returns. I also needed to find Marissa's because about 8 years ago, she had suggested we file taxes separately to save money. Back then, it made sense. But when I looked at her tax forms, I discovered the real reason she wanted us to file separately. Marissa had earned much more in bonuses and commissions than I had realized. Seeing how much she had put into our joint bank account, I wondered where all her extra money had gone. My search led me to a folder full of bank statements from a bank I didn't recognize. The latest statement showed she had saved almost $1 million over the past 8 years. What was her plan, I wondered? Was this some kind of plan for when the kids went to college? I collected the statements and her tax forms, put them in my folder, and went to my car. Just as I was about to leave, my phone beeped with a text from Marissa. She said she would be late because of a showing and not to wait for dinner. "Yeah, sure," I said to myself. I replied, "No problem. See you when you get home." As I sent the message, I couldn't help but wonder if she noticed that I didn't say, "I love you," like I usually do. I arrived at Gina Hawkins' office building, parked the car, and headed to her suite. As I walked in, I was greeted by an attractive blonde receptionist. "I'm here to see Gina Hawkins," I told her. "I have an appointment for 12:30. After a quick check on her computer, she smiled and led me to Gina's office. Gina stood to greet me, shaking my hand warmly. "It's good to see you, Greg," she said, smiling. "Would you like some coffee?" "That would be great, thanks," I replied. Gina turned to the receptionist. Could you bring 2 cups of coffee, please? And maybe some butter and nuts? Sure, the receptionist replied before leaving the room. She returned shortly with 2 cups and some butter portions. Gina motioned for me to sit, and I took a seat across from her. I was surprised to get a call from your father this morning, Gina began. So you're facing a problem that needs legal attention? Yeah, it looks like Marissa's been unfaithful, I said. I'm sorry to hear that, Gina responded, her expression sympathetic. I always thought you two were solid. So did I, but I guess I was wrong, I said. Can you tell me about my options? I explained the situation, including my visit to the clinic and the discovery of the bank statements earlier that day. Gina nodded thoughtfully. I understand how tough this must be, she said. Let me explain a bit about how divorce works here. It's not necessarily about justice. It often comes down to finances. In this state, we have no-fault divorce laws, but you can still file on grounds of adultery if you have strong evidence. What about the STD she gave me? I asked. Gina nodded. That's a strong point, she acknowledged. But her lawyer might claim you caught it from someone else. We know that's not true, but we need to convince a judge. Regarding the money she set aside, she could argue it was meant as a surprise for retirement. You don't really believe that, do you? I questioned. No, it seems more like an exit strategy, Gina replied. She's probably waiting for an opportune time, maybe after your daughters finish school, to leave without complications. Proving that in court, though, will be difficult. So I'm just out of luck? I pressed. Not necessarily, Gina reassured me. I can hire a private detective to investigate. It's pricey, but it could provide the solid evidence we need in court. Would you like to proceed with that? Yes, let's go ahead, I decided. Great, Gina responded. I'll need all the details you can provide. Her car's make and model, license plate number, places she frequents. I pulled out my phone. Actually, I installed a phone tracker app when she lost her phone a few months back. Oh, let me check if it's still active. I opened the app and located her phone at a house on the north side of town. I showed Gina the address. Perfect, she said, jotting it down. I'll get in touch with my investigator right now. She made the call, giving the investigator all the details we had. After hanging up, she looked at me with a determined expression. We'll handle this as discreetly as possible, she assured me. Okay, we're all set. If there's something going on, we'll find out soon enough. Now let's focus on your situation. You have 2 teenage daughters, Lisa and Ginger, ages 14 and 13, correct? Gina asked. Yes, that's right. They're not quite old enough to choose which parent they want to live with, but it's getting close. I want to seek custody, I confirmed. Understood, Gina nodded. You should know that courts typically favor the mother for primary custody. However, we can certainly make a case for you, especially given the circumstances. Who's been the main caretaker? Marissa often goes out in the evenings, so I've been the one at home, I explained. Got it. And just to clarify, are you certain the girls are biologically yours? She inquired cautiously. I believe so, yes. At this point, does it matter? My name is on their birth certificates, and I've raised them since they were babies, I replied a bit defensively. I understand, Gina reassured me. But it might be good to know for sure. I can refer you to a lab for a paternity test if you'd like. Okay, I'll think about that, I said. What about the house situation? We don't have a mortgage. The house was my grandparents', and now it's in a family trust under my parents' names. They let us live there, I explained. Good. That simplifies things a bit. No mortgage issues to deal with, she noted. There will still be personal property and possibly other assets to consider dividing. I'll prepare a list of what you need to address. Is there anything else I need to do right now? I asked. Not at this moment, she replied. I'll start drafting the paperwork, but let's wait to see what the private investigator finds before we proceed too far. However, go ahead and complete the checklist I give you. Do you think I should confront her about this personally? I wondered aloud. It might be wise to at least inform her that she needs to get tested for STDs to prevent any further spread. It's important for both your sakes, Gina advised. That makes sense, I agreed. After finalizing the paperwork, Gina handed me a checklist and a card with the lab's contact information. Anything else I should know? I asked. That's all for now, she replied. Go ahead and handle these tasks. We'll inform you if we receive any updates from the investigator. For any questions about the fees, please speak to my secretary. And Greg? Yes? Don't do anything rash. We'll get through this together. It won't be easy, but things will improve. I understand, I said, appreciating her support. Thanks for everything. You're welcome, she responded. We'll keep in touch. With that, I left her office, wrote a check for her services, and drove to the lab. After picking up the test kit, I stopped by the bank to verify some of the details Gina had mentioned. Then I headed home. This might have been a moment for some to drown their sorrows in alcohol, reflecting on the misery of their situation. But that's not me. I've never been one to drink. Another one of those rules I grew up with. My parents didn't drink, and neither did I. Instead, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table. Just as the coffee was ready, my two daughters burst through the door. They usually came home around this time, taking the bus. Normally, they wouldn't see me until later, but today was different. "Daddy, you're home," Lisa greeted me with surprise. "Are you okay?" "Yes, Daddy, why are you home so early?" Ginger chimed in. "It's been a pretty hectic day," I explained. "Listen, could you two pack some things for a few days? You're going to stay with your grandparents for a while." "Why, Daddy?" Ginger's voice was laced with concern. "What's going on? Is something wrong with Mom? Did you guys have a fight?" "Well, yes, something is wrong, but your mom and I haven't had a fight. That might happen later," I said, trying to keep the conversation as light as possible. "You caught her cheating, didn't you?" Lisa's question caught me off guard. I was taken aback. "What makes you think that?" I asked. She looked down, slightly embarrassed. "I've heard her on the phone a couple of times," she confessed. "She was using that fake voice she does. You know, the one that annoys you?" I nodded, encouraging her to continue. It was something like, "I can't wait to see you again, love." And then she giggled, not like herself at all. It sounded very personal. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. I know you don't like gossip," she added. "It's all right," I reassured her, giving her a hug. Lisa then added, "She's been acting really strange lately. It's like she doesn't really want to talk to us much anymore." "Do you feel that way too, Ginger?" I asked, turning to my younger daughter. She nodded. "Yeah, like she doesn't want us bothering her." I gave them both a reassuring hug. "You can bother me any time," I smiled. "But right now, I need to swab your cheeks for a test." "Cheek swab?" Ginger inquired, eyeing the test kit. "Yes," I confirmed. "My lawyer thinks we should do a DNA test." "You don't think we're really your kids?" Lisa asked, a hint of worry in her voice. "I know you're my kids," I reassured her, "but we just need to confirm everything legally." "So you're getting a divorce?" Lisa asked directly. "It looks like it," I acknowledged. "Isn't there any way you could forgive her?" Ginger wondered softly. "I don't think so," I replied. "She made a mistake that's pretty serious. I had to see a doctor about it this morning." Lisa gasped, almost slipping out a swear word. "Sorry," she muttered. "It's okay," I assured her with a weak smile. "I've felt like swearing today too. Now let's get these samples done." I swabbed the inside of Lisa's cheek gently, then did the same for Ginger. Once their samples were secured in the kit, I took a swab from my own cheek and placed it into a separate vial. "Okay, you two head upstairs and pack enough for a couple of nights. We need to be ready to leave in 15 minutes, and don't forget your homework," I instructed. As the girls went to their rooms to gather their things, I organized the DNA test kit. My plan was to drop the kids off at their grandparents' house and then take the kit to the lab. As we drove, Lisa asked, "Daddy, if you get divorced, can I stay with you?" "Yeah, me too," Ginger chimed in. "I hope so, girls," I responded. "I'm going to ask for custody, but you need to understand that courts often favor the mother." "I don't want to stay with her," Lisa confessed. "Right now, I hate her for what she did to us." I thought about encouraging her not to hate her mother, but I held back. She was voicing feelings that were all too familiar to me. "I understand how you feel, sweetheart," I assured her. "Just remember, no matter what happens, I love you both immensely, and I'll always be there for you." "I love you too, Daddy," Lisa said, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her tears made my resolve even stronger, fueled by my anger towards Marissa. In my mind, I vowed retribution. "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord." My father's words echoed in my head, calming my vengeful thoughts. We arrived at my parents' house and pulled into the driveway. I hugged and kissed both girls, promising to call them later. We were met at the porch by my dad, who hugged the girls as they carried their bags inside. Mom came out to greet us too. "I better get to the lab before it's too late," I said after a few moments. "Are you okay?" my dad asked, concern evident in his voice. "As fine as I can be under the circumstances," I replied. "We'll pray for you," he said. "Give us a call and let us know how things go with Marissa," he added. "I will, but I'm not sure when that will be," I replied. "It's okay, son," Mom reassured me. "You can call any time." "Thanks," I said, giving her a hug. I better head off now. I left feeling a mix of support from my family and the heavy burden of the steps I needed to take next. I got back in my car and headed to the lab, arriving about 30 minutes before they closed. I handed the DNA test kit to the receptionist. "How soon can I expect the results?" I inquired. "We should have them ready by the end of the week," she replied with a reassuring smile. "Great, thanks," I said, and left for home. Along the way, I felt the need to talk to someone who might shed more light on Marissa's behavior. I decided to call her sister Loretta. I connected my Bluetooth earpiece and dialed her number. She picked up after the second ring. "Hey, Greg, how's my favorite brother-in-law?" Loretta greeted cheerfully. "I've had better days," I replied. "Do you have a minute to talk?" "Of course," she responded. "What's going on? Have you spoken to Marissa recently?" "Not since the family gathering last month at your place," I said. "Actually, things aren't great." I briefly explained the situation, keeping the details succinct yet clear. "Oh my God," Loretta gasped after I finished. "Greg, I hate to say this, but it seems like she's fallen back into old patterns." "Old patterns?" I echoed, puzzled. Loretta hesitated before continuing. "Marissa was quite wild in her younger days. She went through relationships rapidly, almost as fast as changing clothes. She wasn't faithful to anyone she dated during high school and college. I thought she had changed after meeting you. She even told me she had found her soulmate and was done with her old ways. I didn't think it was necessary to bring it up before." "I appreciate that, but I wish I had known," I admitted. "I'm sorry, Greg. I should have told you," she said. "It's okay, Loretta. It's not your fault," I assured her, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Listen, I understand you're planning to have her move out. I'm calling to see if she could possibly stay with you for a while," I said, getting to the point. "Actually, yes," I added, "if that's okay with you." I heard Loretta sigh on the other end of the phone. "She might stay here for a bit until she sorts herself out," she said. "Frank won't be thrilled, though." "I don't want to cause any trouble for you guys," I responded, concerned. "It's okay. He'll manage. Just as long as it's not for too long," she reassured me. "Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm not sure when she'll be home tonight, but I'll give you a call when she's on her way to you," I said. "Thank you," Loretta replied. "How did the girls handle everything?" "They're upset, but they're handling it better than I expected," I answered. "You've raised strong young women, Greg. Stay strong for them," she encouraged. "I'm trying," I said. "I need to go make dinner now. We'll talk later, okay?" "I will," I promised. Then we ended the call. Back home, I warmed up some leftover meatloaf for dinner. Just as I finished eating, the phone rang again. It was Gina, my lawyer. I glanced at the clock. It was just past 6:30 p.m. "Hey," I greeted her. "Working late tonight?" I asked. "For you, yes," Gina replied. "I've received some preliminary findings from the private investigator. It appears Marissa has been quite active. She's met with 3 men since this afternoon." I was stunned. 3 men in one day? How does she even find the time? "Yes," Gina confirmed. "I'm sending over the details now. Photos, videos, and a summary of the report. I'd advise against watching the video, but you should definitely listen to the last few minutes of the audio. It's quite revealing." "So, do you think you have enough to proceed with the divorce?" "Absolutely," I affirmed. "Good. Listen to that audio, and then call me," she instructed. "Will do. Thanks, Gina," I said, hanging up, feeling a mix of anger and relief that I was finally moving forward. I booted up my laptop and accessed my email. I found the video Gina mentioned and fast-forwarded to the specific part she had highlighted. Although I had no interest in watching Marissa in such a compromising situation, I was compelled to understand the context of their conversation. "I see you're married," the man remarked, noting her rings. "For the moment," Marissa replied casually. "I noticed you're married too," she observed, glancing at his ring. "Yes, my wife and I have an open relationship," he explained. "And you?" "It's not open in that sense, but I take my freedoms as they come," she stated. "So, your husband doesn't know?" he probed. "No, he doesn't," she confessed. "He has no idea what kind of person he's married to." Listening, I thought bitterly, now I'm realizing the truth. "What's the matter? Isn't he good to you at home?" the man asked, digging deeper. "He had better be. I taught him everything he knows," she boasted. "You taught him?" The man seemed surprised. "Was he inexperienced when you married?" "Believe it or not, he was a 23-year-old virgin," she divulged. "He's quite religious, doesn't smoke, drink, or even curse. He'd probably have a fit if I swore around him. He didn't even know how to make love until we were married." "Damn," the man reacted. "Sounds like you think he's a loser. So why stay with him? Is there love? In some way, I suppose. He's a good father, looks after our girls well, and doesn't complain when I come home late. But beyond that, he's dull, she admitted. Are the girls even his? He asked curiously. She shrugged nonchalantly. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe. Doesn't matter much to me. He believes they're his, and that's what counts, she claimed. How long have you been fooling around? He inquired. I don't mind saying, she replied breezily. I've been having my fun throughout our marriage, and he's still clueless. He has no idea? Hasn't been with anyone else, so how would he know any different? He said. That's it, she confirmed. Hearing her dismiss our life and our family so flippantly devastated me. The depth of her deceit was far worse than I had imagined. At that time, I had to hold back throwing up. It made me feel sick to think that she'd been treating me like this throughout our entire marriage. Do you plan to stick with him? Yeah, for now. At least until the girls finish high school and head to college, she said. That's in about 4 or 5 years. I'll have everything ready to leave by then. Why wait? Yeah, because usually the courts give custody to the mom, and the last thing I want is to end up with 2 teenage girls on my hands, she says. What are you going to do after this? I wanted to party. Maybe hang out with a few people at once. Maybe go on a cruise or retire to Costa Rica or something. I'm not sure, she said. Oh, I've got a couple of guys. Can you sneak away for the weekend? He asked. Sure, she said. I can tell Greg I have a mandatory weekend seminar or something. He'll believe anything I say. Let me know when you can leave and we'll arrange it. You have my number. I will, she said, smiling. He checked his watch. It's getting late and I need to go. I can't wait to see you again, honey. I'm excited too, she said. He left, and Marissa sat on the bed with a big grin. Oh, Greg, she said to the empty room. You have no idea what's coming. After watching the video, I sat there stunned, wiping away tears. The depth of Marissa's betrayal hit me harder than I'd anticipated. With a heavy sigh, I dialed Gina. I just finished watching the video, I told her. You were right, it was enlightening. Gina's response was prompt. What's your next move? Burn it to the ground, I replied, my voice steady. Consider it done, she affirmed. And what about the men she was with? Is there anything we can do about them? I inquired, though part of me dreaded the answer. Unfortunately, no, Gina explained. Alienation of affection lawsuits aren't recognized in this state anymore. I paused, a bitter chuckle escaping me. Don't worry, their own circumstances will catch up with them soon enough. Echoing my father's earlier words, I murmured, Vengeance is mine. I will repay. Gina chuckled softly. Well, I need to get going, she said. I'll start preparing the divorce papers and get everything in order. If Marissa plans to run, we'll make sure it's not on her terms. Thanks, Gina. I really owe you for this, I said gratefully. Just take good care of your girls, she advised. With our conversation over, I leaned back on the couch, tears streaming down my cheeks. 15 years of my life, given to someone who had so little regard for our family. The pain was almost unbearable. A few minutes after hanging up with Gina, my phone buzzed. It was Marissa calling. Hi, I answered. Hi, Greg, she responded. Are you okay? It's been a tough day, I admitted. What's up with you? I'm just wrapping up at work. I think I closed another sale, she said, sounding upbeat. That's good, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I'll be home soon, so I'll see you in about half an hour, okay? Sure, I agreed. Okay, I'll see you then. Love you, she said, her voice taking on that unnervingly insincere tone. Me too, I responded, and hung up. I wondered briefly if she noticed my lack of an I love you in return, but then realized it no longer mattered to me whether she did or not. I gathered the evidence I had printed earlier, 4 photos of Marissa with other men, all on a single sheet, and placed them in a folder. I arranged the folder on the kitchen table, where I planned to confront her when she arrived home. With everything set, I brewed a cup of coffee and sat down to wait. As the clock ticked past 1 hour, then 2, Marissa still hadn't come home. Concern mingled with frustration. I figured she might be delaying her return deliberately, but as more time passed without any word from her, worry crept in. I tried calling her cell phone only to be directed to voicemail. I left a message and followed up with a text, but there was no reply. 3 hours after our call and still no sign of her, I began to fear something more serious might have happened, like an accident. Almost 3.5 hours after Marissa was supposed to be home, my home phone rang. I hurried to answer it, hoping it was her, but it wasn't. Greg Watson, I answered. Mr. Watson, this is Angela Barnes from Mercy Hospital. Are you related to Marissa Watson? She's my wife, I responded, my heart sinking. Mr. Watson, your wife was in an accident and has been brought here for treatment. Can you come as soon as possible? Yes, of course, I said anxiously. Is she okay? What happened? I'm sorry, sir, I can't provide any details, Angela replied. Her doctor will speak with you when you arrive. Please come to the courtesy desk and they will direct you from there. Thank you, I said, trying to keep my composure. After hanging up, I stuffed the envelope with the pictures into my jacket pocket. I considered calling Dad or Loretta for support, but decided to wait until I knew more. I drove to the hospital with a heavy heart, parked quickly, and hurried inside. At the courtesy desk, I introduced myself. I'm Greg Watson, here to see Marissa Watson, I told the middle-aged woman behind the counter. She looked up Marissa's information and then nodded to another staff member. Would you please take Mr. Watson to the ICU? She instructed. The woman came around the desk and gestured for me to follow. We walked in silence to the ICU where a police officer was waiting. Mr. Watson? He asked as we approached. That's me, I confirmed. I'm Officer Simpson. I responded to your wife's accident, he explained. She was driving through the intersection of 3rd and Main when a drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car on the driver's side. My heart ached at the details. I'm very sorry, he added, his tone sincere. It's okay, I managed to say, although nothing felt okay. Her car was towed to the junkyard, he continued. There's not much left of it. He handed me a business card from the tow truck company. If there's anything I can do to help, please give me a call. Thank you, officer, I said, accepting the card. My mind raced with worry as I prepared to see Marissa, unsure of what awaited me. When the officer left, a man in a white medical coat approached me. Greg Watson, he inquired. Yes, I replied. I'm Dr. Blake, the doctor overseeing your wife's treatment. Can we talk for a moment? Of course, I responded. He led me to a small room, closed the door, and sat across from me at a round table. How is my wife? I asked immediately. She has multiple broken bones and several internal injuries. Additionally, she suffered a severe blow to the head. We've placed her in a medically induced coma to aid her recovery, he explained. I nodded, bracing for more. Is there anything else? Yes, there is more concerning news. Our preliminary tests suggest that she may be HIV positive. We've sent samples for more detailed blood tests, but it will take some time to confirm, Dr. Blake continued. I felt a cold wave of shock. I found out this morning she has gonorrhea, I shared, still processing the news. And are you receiving treatment for that? He asked. Yes, I confirmed. That's good to hear. However, I recommend you get tested for HIV as soon as possible. If you could see your primary care doctor tomorrow, that would be best. It's important to know your status, he advised. I nodded, absorbing his recommendations. How long will she be in the coma? I asked, shifting the topic back to Marissa. It depends on her progress, but it could be anywhere from 10 days to 2 weeks. After that, her stay here may extend depending on her recovery speed, he explained. Can I see her now? I asked, eager yet anxious. Absolutely, Dr. Blake said, standing. She needs your support now more than ever. He led me to the door and pointed down the hall. She's in room 5, just over there. Thank you, doctor, I said, shaking his hand before walking to Marissa's room, my mind racing with everything I had just learned. I walked into Marissa's hospital room and the sight of her struck me hard. She was swathed in bandages, with one leg encased in a cast that extended to her hip. Her face was bruised and swollen, stitched cuts marring her skin. She looked as though she had barely survived a brutal battle. Silently, I said a prayer for her, then took off my wedding ring. I pulled out the envelope containing the photos, wrote her name on it, and placed my ring inside before sealing it. Turning to the nurse who was attentively monitoring Marissa, I held out the envelope. Could you make sure she gets this when she wakes up? I asked. Of course, the nurse replied warmly. You can place it on that tray over there, she suggested, pointing to a nearby wheeled tray. Thank you, I said, setting the envelope on the tray to ensure Marissa would see it upon awakening. I lingered for a moment looking down at Marissa. Despite everything, it pained me to see her in such a state. Noticing she was still wearing her wedding rings, I gently removed them and pocketed them. Goodbye, Marissa, I whispered. I'll see you later. With a nod to the nurse, who offered me a sympathetic smile, I left the room. Driving home, I called Loretta to update her on the situation. She was stunned by the news, especially the complications with Marissa's health. "Greg, you know Frank won't be comfortable with her staying here if she's HIV positive," Loretta stated. "He's worried about the kids, and I can't argue with him on that." Her parents had moved to Florida in retirement, eliminating another potential support option. "Then it seems I'll need to find her an apartment," I concluded. "I think that's wise," Loretta agreed. "I'm sorry, Greg, but I have to prioritize my family. She's made her choices. I can help move her belongings, but after that, I need to step back." "I understand," I reassured her. "You're doing what you need to do." "It's late, and I need to get some sleep, but please keep me posted," she said. "I will," I promised. "Thanks for everything, Loretta." Hanging up, I felt the weight of the day settling over me as I drove the rest of the way home in silence. It was close to midnight when I finally reached home. Exhausted from the day's events, I quickly undressed and fell into bed, asleep almost the moment my head hit the pillow. The next morning, I woke up feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I called my doctor's office and was surprised to find they could fit me in for an appointment later that morning. After securing my appointment, I called my parents to update them on Marissa's situation. They were understandably shocked, particularly about the possibility of her being HIV positive. They offered to bring the girls to the hospital if they wished to visit her. I also shared with them the troubling evidence I had gathered about Marissa. Dad asked me to send the details to his email, which I did immediately. "It's really bad," I admitted over the phone. "It's all right, son," he reassured me. "We'll handle this together." Once I had sent the email, I called Gina to inform her of the latest developments. She was also taken aback, but mentioned that this would allow her to finalize the divorce papers more promptly. I then contacted Marissa's office to inform her colleagues of her accident. They expressed their condolences and promised to visit her. The following 2 weeks were a blur of activity. I found a suitable 2-bedroom ground-floor apartment with an attached garage and secured it by paying the deposit and 2 months' rent up front, using funds from Marissa's half of our joint accounts. When the girls and Loretta arrived, we packed up all of Marissa's belongings, including our wedding album, and moved them to her new place. During this hectic time, I also received the results from the DNA lab confirming that both girls were indeed mine. This was a small, yet significant relief amidst the chaos. I met with the insurance adjuster to inspect the wreck of Marissa's car. Both of us were astounded she had survived the crash given the state of the vehicle. Since the car and insurance policy were in her name, the insurance company would issue her a check directly. I gathered the last of her belongings from the car and brought them to her new apartment, trying to close this painful chapter and focus on rebuilding our lives. A week after the accident, during a phone call, my mom asked, "Did you stop by Marissa's?" "No, I haven't," I replied, meaning since that initial visit. "Why?" she inquired. "I was just wondering," she continued, a tone of concern in her voice. "She's made it clear she doesn't care about us and wants to escape everything," I explained. "I'm giving her what she wants, just not how she planned it." 2 weeks later, I visited my doctor. Thankfully, I was clear of the gonorrhea Marissa had passed on, but we were still waiting to see if there was anything more serious. Physically, I was nearly healed, but emotionally, I was far from recovery. Later that day, I called my boss Alan to tell him I'd be returning to work, which pleased him greatly. That afternoon, the hospital called to say Marissa had woken from her coma. The nurse suggested I visit that evening, which worked well for me. I updated Gina, who had already filed the divorce papers and was waiting for Marissa to regain consciousness so the documents could be served. She arranged for the bailiff to meet me at the hospital. Next, I called Loretta to see if she would join me at the hospital. I then spoke to my daughters. "Your mom's awake," I told them. Their response was lukewarm. Both shrugged off the news. "I'm going to see her this afternoon. Would you like to come?" "No thanks, Dad," Lisa replied firmly. "I'm too mad at her right now." "Me too," added Ginger. "And I've got a lot of homework." "All right," I said. "I'll drop you off at your grandparents' then." By 4:30, I was driving them to my parents' house. I told them Marissa was awake and that I would be meeting Loretta and the bailiff there. "Let us know how it goes, son," Dad said as I left the girls with them. "I will," I assured him. "I'll come back for the girls afterward." "Good. Then you can have some of Mom's lasagna when you get back," he said, offering a comforting smile. Mom's lasagna had a way of making any day better. "Sounds perfect," I said, feeling a slight lift in my spirits as I headed to the hospital. He handed her the documents. "You are being served with divorce papers," he stated formally. Marissa took the papers, her hands trembling slightly. There was a long pause as she scanned the top page, her face draining of color. I see, she finally murmured, setting the documents beside her on the hospital bed. I turned to Loretta, who had remained silent, her expression somber. Loretta, thanks for being here, I said. Of course, she replied softly, her eyes not leaving Marissa. Turning back to Marissa, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. We needed to resolve this, I told her, for everyone's sake. Marissa nodded, her eyes downcast. I understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted it to come to this. I know, I said, although I wasn't sure if that was entirely true. But here we are. The room was heavy with unspoken words and tension. I decided it was time to leave. I'll let you rest, I said. Marissa didn't look up. Thank you, Greg. And I am sorry, she added, her voice cracking slightly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. Loretta and I exited the room, leaving Marissa with her thoughts and the reality of the papers she now held. Outside, Loretta squeezed my arm. Are you okay? She asked. I will be, I answered, managing a small smile. Thanks for coming, it meant a lot. She hugged me briefly. Call me if you need anything, she said. I will, I promised. As I drove away from the hospital, the weight of the past week seemed to lift slightly. The future was uncertain, but at least now there was a path to begin moving forward. The process server handed Marissa the envelope and snapped a picture. You've been served, he declared briskly before exiting the room. You couldn't even wait until I was out of the hospital? Marissa asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. No, I replied firmly. You were the one who wanted to run away. I'm just accelerating your timetable by a few years. Her eyes searched mine for any sign of the man she once knew. Do the girls know? She asked, her tone shifting. Yes, they do, I confirmed. And they're not too fond of you right now, which is why they aren't here. And you don't need to worry about being burdened with them. I'm seeking full custody, though I'm willing to grant liberal visitation rights if they decide they want to see you. But as of now, they don't. Her expression faltered, clearly not expecting such decisiveness on my part. And I suppose you hate me too? She ventured. Hate is a strong word, I countered calmly. Let's just say my opinion of you has significantly diminished. She nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of my words. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? She asked, a hint of desperation in her voice. Maybe someday, I said, when I can look at our girls and not see the hurt you've caused. And just so you know, I had their DNA tested. They're mine. Her eyes widened slightly, surprised by my proactive approach. That won't change anything, Greg, she murmured almost to herself. I see, I continued, shifting the topic. When you're discharged, you won't be coming home. I've rented an apartment for you. Loretta will help you move in. Marissa turned to look at her sister, who had remained silent until now. All your belongings are already there, and the utilities are set up in your name, I explained further, pulling out another envelope. Here's your half of our joint savings, minus the deposit and 2 months' rent for the apartment. Since your car was totaled, you'll also be receiving an insurance payout. She took the envelope from my hand, her touch hesitant. The room filled with a thick silence that seemed to stretch between us, laden with the finality of our fractured lives. She took the envelope and nodded her head. By the way, I know about the escape fund you set up. My attorney has frozen that account. If you sign the divorce papers, she'll release the funds, I said. Minus my half, of course, Marissa added, her expression a mixture of shock and resignation. I'll fight you for it, she declared defiantly. I don't think that would be wise, I countered. Unless you want all the evidence I've gathered to go public, it's quite damning. Her defiance seemed to deflate at my words. Have your lawyer review the papers. I believe you'll find the terms are as fair as they can be under the circumstances. Marissa turned to Loretta, seeking support, but found none. You should have listened, Loretta said coldly. You lied to everyone, Greg, your kids and me. I agreed to help you move into your apartment when you're discharged, but after that, I'm done. You need to sort yourself out. Marissa started to sob. I'm so sorry, she cried, looking for some sign of sympathy from her sister. That and a few bucks will get you a coffee, Loretta snapped back. I won't let you near my family again until you make things right, starting with a genuine apology to your husband and daughters. Through her tears, Marissa looked at me. Greg, I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't mean much now, but I do love you. You're right, it doesn't mean much, I replied coldly. Sign the papers, Marissa. She nodded, overwhelmed and silent. Goodbye, Marissa. As I turned to leave, she called out, Greg, can I call the girls, please? You can call them, I said, pausing at the door, but it's up to them if they want to talk to you. I understand, she murmured. Thank you for that, at least. You're welcome, I said without turning back. I left the room, aware of the disapproving glances from the nursing staff. They might not have approved of the timing, but this was not their decision to judge. Driving away from the hospital, I headed to my parents' house. There, surrounded by family, I tried to find some solace in a hearty serving of my mom's lasagna, letting the familiar comfort of home soothe the sting of a painful day. The divorce process concluded smoothly. 3 months later, I found myself not only legally free from Marissa, but also relieved to learn that I was HIV negative, a fortunate result mirrored by Marissa as well. To my surprise, Gina presented me with a check for over $450,000, half of the secret account Marissa had amassed. With no immediate need for such a sum, I allocated it into college funds for Lisa and Ginger. Life adjusted to its new rhythm for me and my daughters. They were my anchor, keeping me grounded amidst the challenges of single fatherhood. Although managing teenage girls on my own was sometimes trying, my mother's advice and support proved invaluable. Marissa, on the other hand, seemed to be settling into her role as a single, divorced woman. After a year of cautious interactions, the girls began to reconnect with her, spending an occasional afternoon together. Marissa had resumed her real estate career with a new company, following an unceremonious exit from her previous employer due to disclosed indiscretions. According to the girls, she was performing well and had shed her deceptive tendencies. Meanwhile, I noticed an increasing amount of attention from the single women at church. They often sent me home with homemade dishes, from pies to lasagna, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by my daughters. Dad, you need to start dating again, Lisa encouraged one evening. It's not good for you to be alone, she added. I wouldn't even know where to start, I confessed, feeling out of touch with dating. And I'm not alone, I continued. You two keep me quite busy. We won't be around forever, though, Ginger chimed in with a mix of seriousness and humor. It's simple, Dad. Just ask someone out to dinner. You can do that, right? Reflecting on Ginger's words, I realized she might be right. It was perhaps time to explore life beyond fatherhood. That very Wednesday, I encountered Rhonda Carson at the church's coffee shop. Rhonda, a widow who had lost her husband to a tragic accident and was raising her teenage daughter solo, had recently given me a casserole that I had particularly enjoyed. Hi, Rhonda. How are you? I initiated, recalling the comfort her dish had brought. Hanging in there, Greg, she replied. How about you? I'm doing okay. Really enjoyed that casserole last week. Thank you, I said, hoping to spark further conversation. That's good to hear. It can be tough managing on your own, can't it? She sympathized. Yeah, it's a challenge sometimes, but we manage, I agreed, finding common ground in our shared experiences as single parents. Over coffee, we delved into the intricacies of raising teenagers alone. Encouraged by the ease of our exchange, I took a bold step. Rhonda, I'm pretty new to this, but would you like to have dinner with me sometime, maybe this Friday? I asked, feeling a mix of anticipation and nerves. She smiled, her response warming my heart. Yes, Greg, I'd like that, she accepted gracefully. Great, I beamed, feeling a flicker of excitement about the possibilities ahead. How about trying that new Texas Roadhouse place? Sounds perfect, Rhonda agreed. It's a date then. Leaving the coffee shop, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in a long time. Perhaps it was the right moment to start anew, not just for me, but for everyone involved. The girls were excited about my date with Rhonda, and they liked the idea of spending the evening with Linda, so it was all set. That Friday, I invited the girls over and we went out to dinner. Rhonda looked really cute in her denim skirt, and we had a great time. We didn't get too intimate that night, but Rhonda gave me a heartfelt kiss as I dropped her off at her house. I caught a glimpse of 3 faces peeking out from her window, and it looked like they were cheering us on. Rhonda hugged me and said, "That was the best night I've had in months." Me too, I replied. What if we do this again soon? She suggested with a smile. Maybe next time we can have a quiet evening in, she hinted playfully, her hand gently brushing my leg. I felt a spark of excitement. That sounds like a plan, I agreed, enjoying the flirtation. The girls were thrilled about how well the date went, and honestly, I was too. Spending time with Rhonda felt natural and refreshing. While I'm not certain where this might lead, I'm open to exploring where our next steps might take us.